seconds. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call to order the June 4, 2018 meeting of the City Council for the City of Wheat Ridge, Colorado on our study session. First up tonight is citizens' comment on agenda items. When I call your name, if you would move to the podium and give us your first name and your last name, and spell your last name and your address, and you have about 3 minutes to speak. So our first speaker is Dorothy Archer, and Jake Burkhardt is on deck.
Dorothy Archer, 3640 Marshall Street, Wheat Ridge. Good evening, Mayor Starker, council, staff, and citizens. I'm here tonight to address the results of the survey that was mailed in March. Now that the results are in, I have some concerns. Of the 4,500 that were mailed to the homes through post office data, there was only 26% return, approximately 1,150. Of that 1,150, 43% were renters. Fine, they have every right to fill that out. No problem. I have no idea what was on the survey, as I did not receive one myself. I do know that number 24 addressed the 35-foot allowance. Now, if 43% were renters that wanted the 35 feet, what does that say to the homeowners? Is this transparent? Is it legitimate? I think it gives a really mistaken slant. Do your renters think, maybe, perhaps, that you were addressing a 35-foot apartment house? Maybe. In September 15th, minutes went into great detail from your planning commission. Studies had been done by Mr. Wallace, Mr. Buchanan, Mr. John Darcy, Mrs. Kemsey, and Ms. Kamut. Perhaps these findings need to be reviewed again by council. Lower the heights would eliminate unnecessary density and would not affect the articulated goal of the preservation of our neighborhoods at this time. I am requesting 25-foot maximum height with a 15-foot bulk plane. Lot size will make a difference, perhaps, on the bulk plane. Thank you. Also, I want to review and remind you on your November 20th results from an online survey. 3-story homes, 42% said yes, 64% were no. 42% were yes. 64% wanted a bulk plane. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Jake Burkhardt, and Michael Epson is on deck.
Good evening. My name is Jake Burkhardt, and this is my first time here, but I've been a native of Wheat Ridge since 1955, and I've seen a lot of changes, most of them to the negative. There has been a few that have been very positive, but my biggest question is why you want to go from a 25 to a 27-foot easement. What's the concept behind something like that? I mean, don't we have enough property to help everybody? I mean, years ago, my dad had the property that I live on now. The back could not be sold off because there wasn't enough property. Today, you guys can put 7 different places in that one little tiny square. I won't sell it, but I mean, it could be done. I don't understand why. That's my biggest thing, and I'm in for changes like everybody else, but Some of them are sort of ridiculous, and I can mention one major one, but it's not my time to do that. But a lot of people know about that street too. Anyway, that's my whole comment right there. Thank you, folks.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Michael Epson and Kit Vermillion on deck.
Good evening to the council, Mr. Mayor. My name is Michael Epson. I'm at 2905 Chase Street. You've seen me a number of times speaking about the bulk plane, primarily in the R1C. I think that the survey results, as you'll see, back up extending the bulk plane to districts 1 and 2 and perhaps all of the city of Wheat Ridge. In addition to that, we would like to see a 27-foot height limit enacted in District 1 and 2. This would be very similar to our neighbors just to the east in the Highlands and just to the south of us in Edgewater. We feel that this height restriction, along with the bulk plane, is imperative to preserve the quality of life to the people in the neighborhoods. By not enacting these limitations, we're protecting the developers, not the citizens of Wheat Ridge that have been living in these neighborhoods for all these years. So I urge you to enact bulk plane for 1 and 2, and please take a look at height restrictions for 1 and 2 as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Kit Vermillion and Suzy Griffin on deck.
Good evening. I'm Kit Vermillion. I live at 32nd and 3297 Ingalls. And I did not get the survey, so I don't know if I should even be up here, but I just want to say that I'm not for more density and I'm not for more growth. If that's what it takes for growth to get density, it's not worth it. That's it.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Suzy Griffin and Dan LeBaron on deck.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Council. My name is Suzy Griffin. I live at 5880 West 35th Avenue. My question, again, I did not receive the survey either. I would like to go on record as saying I was a little bit upset about it. I understood later that I guess there was a copy online that you could see. I wasn't aware of that. And I think my biggest complaint is that there were only 4,500 surveys sent out. There were over, if I'm correct, over close to 31,000 citizens in the city. I think that's a pretty small amount to be represented, particularly when Mrs. Archer's mentioned that there were 43% of those that were renters. I would have loved to have been able to look over it, get it in my mail and actually look over it and see it. My husband and I have been talking for quite some time about trying to look into converting one of our garages into a rental property. And we've been to the city office several times and been told that this would be addressed, this would be addressed. To the best of my knowledge, I believe Golden, Arvada, Lakewood, all of these surrounding cities have this available to homeowners, and I'm wondering why it's taking so long to get any kind of answer, or if I'm being ignorant here, maybe it's already been answered and I'm not aware. So I was looking into that as far as the easement. I agree with Mrs. Archer. I don't think that I think that the 5-foot easement is far too close, and I agree that that with the height and the pitch doors. So that's where I'm at. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Dan LeBaron and Rita Weller on deck.
Did she mention ADUs? Is that what she said? Why we haven't addressed them?
Yes.
I'm Dan LeBaron. I live at 3610 Benton Street. I just was reading, I think it's the Wheat Ridge Connection, and I heard about this survey, and it's really cool that I did, so I'm glad I'm here, but that was like yesterday. But there was a deal about the accessory dwelling units, which our last speaker was talking about, and it is in the survey. So, my zoning is R1A, which doesn't allow it at all. I talked to one of the planners today, and it doesn't sound like there's anything in planning at this point, but there are many houses in my neighborhood that have little units behind them. I don't know about you guys, but they're basically all over the neighborhood, so I'm assuming that they're illegal. I'd like to have one behind my house for me to live in, for my daughter to live in, possibly do an Airbnb, a VRBO. I don't think it would impact the neighborhood a lot, but the survey had, quite a few good ideas about the number of people that can live in the units. Let's see. 8 out of 10 said they wouldn't. They would consider using it for an elderly family member, which would be me at this point, I guess. Half might consider it as an ADU for personal use, rental income, or an adult child or visitors. I think if you're going to do this, which I'm assuming you guys are going to be thinking about and hoping that maybe it'd work out so we could all do this, parking, is going to be an issue, and I know there's a lot of people that are worried about density in Wheat Ridge. I don't think we have to worry a whole lot about the density that people are afraid of, although right down the street from me, the slot house, which I didn't know was legal. So that must be legal because they only built it 2 years ago. So if you guys are thinking about these, I'm voting yes. Okay? So thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Rita Weller and Thomas Slattery on deck.
Good evening, Council. My name is Rita Weller. I live at 3290 Ingle Street. I have been in the Wheat Ridge area for all of my 72 years. I just want to say that I'm totally against the 35 feet height and the flat roofs. And also that the renters were taken into consideration when voting. I am a landlord. I have quite a few units, and renters don't stay in the vicinity. They go elsewhere, so I don't think they should have a say in it. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Thomas Slattery and Roger Lesher on deck.
Thomas Slattery. I live at 6869 West 32nd Avenue. I pretty much want to support what other people have said. I would personally prefer a 25-foot limit for flat roof buildings. On the other hand, if you feel you must have 35-foot height in the R1 and R2 zoning districts, limit it to 2.5-story construction. That way the roof must be sloped, and that will reduce the bulk of the building and the impact on the neighborhood. But also, when a building is pushed to the maximum of the bulk plane, those portions that aren't pushed to the maximum that are within the area of the 5-foot setback should be offset from that plane. Now, the one house down on Chase Street that is 3 stories and has caused controversy, at least the portions that are not 3 stories high are set back. That reduces the impact greatly. So there are a lot of things that can be done, and I think they need to be done, and they need to be done in all residential districts. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Roger Lesher, and Mark Apple is on deck. Mary Apple, excuse me.
Roger Lasher, Wheat Ridge residents. Interesting, this is really related to the Wadsworth bypass or the Wadsworth discussion, okay? The greenhouse property that's being developed and it's coming up shortly. The developer is going to be developed. Mark Wahlberg said, when they develop the Grawl property, we're going to make them put in a street. property functions well without a street that the city's gonna make us put in. Because he said that, I've talked to the manager of the department, and she's in favor of putting a street down to, extending the street on 42nd down to Wadsworth.
Mr. Lesher, are you speaking on Wadsworth Boulevard or some other property? Okay, thank you.
Yeah. I just broke it, I'm gonna be kind of jagged on the speech here. Okay, a couple of weeks ago, when they had the meeting with the development, iron out the plans, what they were gonna do, the developer said, well, we can take and extend 42nd down to Wadsworth, and that will eliminate some of our problems of possibly heavy traffic. Or, if it's a problem, we can take and go to 44th and Yarrow. And what we can do is we can acquire the property rights, and we can take and extend the lane down to Wadsworth, okay? That's going to take up 18 parking spaces.
Mr. Lesher, once again, are you speaking about Wadsworth Boulevard or some other property that's not on Wadsworth?
This is,
And just please confine your remarks to the Wadsworth Boulevard study that we have in our package tonight.
what the problem is, the 44, the Wadsworth has legs that nobody has talked about. And they're taking and saying, well, you know, when this is done, that's going to happen. None of that stuff is on the blueprints today. Nobody's telling us about it, okay? I'm watching out for my interests, my family's interests. They're telling them, you can do this when Wadsworth is done. That should be on the blueprints, don't you think? That's the way I feel about it. Since we have disagreement on what Wadsworth is affected and what isn't, you know, I'm going to take and be here whenever I get a chance to talk. But it does have an effect, it is to do with Wadsworth, because they're putting things in on Wadsworth that is going to extend through the neighborhood. And that's a direct result of Wadsworth widening. Mark Wahlberg said, you know, if there's any problems created by widening Wadsworth, the property owners can mitigate it with the money, all the money we're going to give them. The money we're going to give the people is not for mitigating city property problem caused by city or widening the street out. It's to replace the property somewhere along the line. I think we're not going far enough in what's really happening other than, you know, we're going to see an engineering report, and I'm wondering what it's going to say about why we're going to justify putting the CFI like this. You know, that's all I got to say so far this time.
Thank you. Mary Apple is next, and Barb Halliday is on deck. Yes, but speak into the microphone.
My name is Mary Abel, and I live at 6512 West 34th Avenue, and I have been here all my life. In my entire life, I have lived east of Wadsworth, and most of it really east of Pierce Street. And I was, like I said, very concerned about the survey myself. I did not receive one, and I know everybody can't receive one. However, I haven't talked to many people in my little pocket of the world that have received one. And so I was upset, you know, that maybe we need to reconsider that. And I am definitely opposed to that 35-foot flat roof. I know things do not stay the same, and I'm seeing many improvements. I see a lot of young people walking the streets, and I'm happy to see that. However, we can't give up our character of the neighborhood to achieve the young. I think they'll come anyway. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Barb Halliday?
Hello, my name's Barbetta Halliday, and I live at 3680 Marshall Street. And my comment is about the survey also. I don't understand why you can't send it out to every household in the city. I noticed you sent out postcards, And then you send out the surveys. So I'm thinking in going forward, if you've got a survey of this magnitude, you ought to send it to every household in the city. Because I, too, didn't receive it and had no idea of what was on it. So I, too, oppose any kind of 35-foot flat-roofed homes. We need to look out for people who are needing housing. And if you have developers come in and raise these smaller homes, turn them into duplexes that are some monstrosity that cancels out the sunlight for their neighbors, and then charges, $3,000 a month to rent, I think there's a problem with that. And so you need to look at what's going on in Denver, and you need to pay attention and hopefully include all of the citizens of Wheat Ridge before you try to go off on these deals. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That concludes all of the people that had signed up to speak at this tonight on the sign-up sheet. Is there anyone here in the room who's not signed up who would like to speak on a matter on the agenda? Yes, please come forward to the podium and give us your name, spell your last name, and your address.
Good evening, Mayor Stricker and Council. My name is Rachael Holton, Hultin, and I live at 4690 Balsam Street. And I'm here this evening, I'm just going to make one short comment about the citizen survey, and that I was really encouraged to see the support for looking into ADUs as a possibility. I think it's a great opportunity for our city to support economic viability for the residents who live here and residents interested in living here. I think it's an option to help people stay in their homes a longer time, and I am excited to see what happens next with that. But I'm here more on behalf of the Wheat Ridge Active Transportation Advisory Team to talk about the Wadsworth Pell recommendations. We, of course, have been involved since the get-go, and we're incredibly excited to see the initial design to include the dedicated cycle track on the east side of Wadsworth. We thought that was a really bold design, and we were really proud that our city was really leading the state in terms of cutting-edge, safe accommodations for bicyclists. We also understand that the project is $10 million short. And in reviewing the value engineering recommendations, we do understand that the two-way cycle track is most likely something that will not make it through that value engineering exercise. We're happy to see that some of that is being offset by accommodating cyclists on the sidewalks, by widening the sidewalks. I think people on bikes will ride on the side of the street that they're on. However, we'd really like the city to look at this opportunity, not within the context of the Pell, but if the cycle track does not get included in the final design, to look at what are other accommodations that are parallel and very close to Wadsworth. Every day that I drive Wadsworth, which is 2 or 3 times, just have started an informal count. I see no fewer than 6 to 7 people riding their bikes every day, and that's just me driving a couple miles down Wadsworth. So we hope that the city will, if that doesn't make it, look at alternative accommodations on Upham and or Teller Street. But I also want to call out the city for being a great champion in this process to ensure that there are accommodations for bicyclists and pedestrians, including very innovative uses for safe pedestrian crossings. And it's my understanding that the proposed value engineering designs do include a continuous ADA corridor all the way to the Clear Creek connections. So I just want to say the ADATs really want to support the process and are really proud of staff and our city's leadership on it. And we hope that you'll continue to lead with safe accommodations for bicyclists and pedestrians. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I saw another hand. Is there another speaker? Yes, sir. Please come forward.
I live at 3855 Quay Street here in Wheat Ridge. I've been here for over 40 years. I oppose the 35-foot. I think what you did to 38 is really jacked up. I live over here. The people that authorized that 38 did not live over in this area, and I think it's wrong. I watched my friends get their property annexed, taken away from them to widen the streets, and then you guys go off and make it narrow again and jack it all up, make it 2 lanes instead of the 4 lanes that was meant for. I'm completely against this. I want against the 35-foot. I just wanted my piece heard.
Thank you very much. Are there other speakers in the room? Anyone else in the room who is not signed up? Yes, sir, please come forward.
Hello, my name is Robert Grissom. I live at 4190 Quay Street. Been there since 95. My grandmother is actually buried in the cemetery across the street, and my mother was born in this area, so it has a lot of meaning to me. I did not get the survey, and had I gotten the survey, I definitely would not be in favor of the 35-foot flat roof multi-unit houses that I've seen in the past in other areas around us. So I just wanted to let you know that was my opinion.
Thank you very much. Are there any other speakers? Yes, ma'am, if you'd come forward.
Good evening. I'm Deborah Grissom, and I also live at 4190 Quay Street. And Mrs. Archer came by yesterday and told us about the survey. And I had not even heard about the survey, but I'm opposed to the 35-foot 3-story building. On our street, we have 2 duplexes, and in one duplex, there are 4 young women that live there with their grandmother, and every night there are 8 to 10 cars along our street because the girlfriends have boyfriends, and they come to visit, and they're there all night, or not all night, but late into the night, until midnight possibly, and it has reduced the parking at that end of the block so much. And I think about the density in Denver and how the 35-foot flat roof buildings, if there are several on a street, how I believe is really ugly. The density is really tough for all the other neighbors, if there are other neighbors. I've seen some really nice homes knocked down and these monstrosities built that have multiple people in them. And if you're worried about density, that's not the way to go. And I'm, as a resident, opposed to the 35-foot roof line and flat roof. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there other people in the audience tonight who would like to speak? Please come forward. Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Stefano Trushke. That's S-T-E-F-A-N-O, Trushke, T-R-U-S-C-H-K-E. I live at 3055 Teller Street. I personally live in a single-story 1958 brick house. I love that style of house. I fell in love with it very rapidly. I recently moved to Wheat Ridge from nearby Highlands about just over a year ago. I've lived in Denver for just over 10 years now. I'm actually a civil engineer by trade, working in water resources in the nearby Federal Center. So that's what brought me to Wheat Ridge. I want to be a little closer to my job. I'm an avid cycling commuter. And I would encourage the council to consider, consider how they want to respond to the height restrictions. I understand that the 35-foot is currently in the building code as of right now. I have not had a chance to research how long that has been in place, if that's a recent addition. I know some of our neighboring municipalities are considering lower height restrictions. I personally came from the Highlands neighborhood, which I've seen some tasteful larger homes, the flat roof style homes go in place, and I've seen some that are just terrible. But I don't know if the city should be dictating architectural preferences. They're flat roofs, but in their nature aren't necessarily, I'll say it, evil. They're not preferred. Sometimes they lead to overly dense neighborhoods. I do encourage the adoption of the bulk plane. I've recently read about that in neighboring municipalities and the emergency resolution that was recently placed. That seems like something that should be considered as potentially a viable option. I think that's, definitely need to consider all different options for evaluating the proposal.
Thank you. Are there other people in the audience who would like to speak tonight on items on the agenda? Raise your hand and I will call on you. I don't see any further comments, so thank you all very much. I do see one of our counselors, Mr. Matthews. Is there something that you would like to interject here?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Some time ago, I had talked about with Mr. Goff about getting all of these types of documents together in one place on our website, separate from council agendas, so that people could find them. Is the survey going to be posted in that repository of documents like the NRS?
Yes.
Mr. Goff?
Yes.
Can you tell us how they might go through the website to find it yet?
It should be on the homepage at this point. When the first page you go to, since it's a brand new survey, there'll be a link to it. In the future, we'll decide where it should go to be most readily available. But again, okay, sir. I'll respond to that, sir. Thank you. The survey is also available at City Hall if anybody wants to come, and we also will make it available at the Wheat Ridge Library.
Thank you, Mr. Goff.
Okay, our first item on our agenda is the citizen survey report. Mr. Goff, do you have a presentation on this?
We do. Thank you. Carly Lawrence is going to introduce our presenter this evening.
Have Lori Urban with the National Resource Center here to present the findings of the survey, and she'll be doing the presentation and then she'll take questions after she's done.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor Starker, members of council, and residents of Wheat Ridge. Thanks so much for having me here to present the 2018 Citizen Survey results. My name is Lori Urban, as Carly mentioned. I'm a senior research associate at National Research Center. I was a project manager for this project in 2018, and I have been the project manager since, I believe, 2008, when you did a survey then for us, with us. So I first want to thank Carly and Heather Geyer, who I didn't see here tonight. They both assisted me in helping prepare the survey questions along with all input from staff and council, and provided valuable guidance and knowledge into that process to make sure things ran smoothly until we were able to get the survey into the field. The surveys like this are about accountability and transparency. Definitely some of your residents have seen that and appreciate the ability to provide input. These residents, obviously, many of them weren't selected, but we'll talk a little bit more about that. It does help to bring in a different voice, the people who don't show up to your meetings, the people who don't call council or call staff to share their opinions. And this presentation is a summary of the very thick report that I'm sure you received. So I'll go through these more highlight top level results, but the full detail can be found in that report. So surveys like this, generally, since the city's been doing it and has definitely a long trend line, it is to measure resident response over time. There are a number of questions on the survey that have been asked since the beginning of the survey. And and you're able to see how trends are impacted based on changes or policies the city's implemented, changes across the nation that are happening. A lot of what you maybe see in this survey, and I've seen in a lot of other Front Range communities that I manage their projects, are trends that are related to growth, transportation, housing, availability and quality. Those kinds of things definitely we see are being impacted lately across the Front Range. Surveys like these are also used to measure performance over time. They're used in strategic planning and budgeting. We have a lot of communities who are incorporating survey data as one of their pieces in their budgeting process. And we can also benchmark your ratings to other ratings across in communities across the nation as well as in the Front Range. We used best practices in survey research for your 2018 administration, and we maintained many of the same methods that we've used in previous survey years. The survey is meant to be representative of the entire population, as many residents pointed out. We did mail to about 4,500 households, but the methods that we use are to increase response and increase representativeness of the people that we did hear back from. We'd send 3 contacts to help increase response. We know about a third of our responses come from that second wave of the survey that we send out. And those people who take a little bit extra nudge to complete the survey probably have different opinions than those who are ready to respond with that first mailing. We also make a civic appeal in the letter that we send to residents, calling on their duty as citizens of Wheat Ridge to complete the survey and share their opinions and feedback. We also compare the respondent demographic profile to the census data for adults 18 and older, so that we can make sure that we are saying that these results are generalizable to the entire population. So as I mentioned, we did mail to 4,500 households. This was an increase in the sample size from 2015, which was 3,000 households. We got just over 1,100 completed surveys, 1,136 to be exact, for a 26% response rate, which has declined slightly since 2015, but is on par with what we see in other communities for mailed surveys of this kind. We had a 3% margin of error around all survey respondents, so we're looking at results that are for everyone who answered that question, 1136. We have a plus or minus margin of error of 3 percentage points. And for the first time this year, we allowed survey respondents who got the mail survey to complete the survey online. They had an access code that they would enter into the online form to be able to complete the survey. We had 181 of our 1136 respondents complete the survey online. As I mentioned before, we weight the survey results to make sure that they are representative of all residents within the community. And we compared responses by demographic and geographic subgroups, so by council district, as well as different characteristics of respondents, whether they rent or own, if they live in detached or attached housing, respondents of different ages, length of residencies, and so forth. All of those data are definitely included in the appendix in the full report. So I'm going to go through some of the key findings, and these kind of mirror those that you'll see in the executive summary in the report. And we have another section at the very end of some additional topics that were covered on the survey that are definitely noteworthy. So the first key finding that we found was that Wheat Ridge residents are definitely pleased with their quality of life and feel it will improve in the next 5 years. About 8 in 10 rated their overall quality of life in the city as excellent or good, which is similar to what we've seen in previous iterations, and it was similar to both the national and the Front Range averages. And we saw about 6 in 10 felt that their quality of life would improve in the next 5 years, again similar to what we saw in 2010. Sorry, my little graphic got messed up there. So we also asked another set of questions, which aren't on this slide, about different aspects of quality of life. The city as a place to work, as a place to retire, as a place to raise children. And most of these got excellent or good evaluations by about 2/3 or more of respondents. Most residents said that they would recommend living and would remain in Wheat Ridge for the next 5 years. Ratings for both of these items were stable over time and were similar to the national benchmark. However, we did see more residents in Wheat Ridge saying that they would recommend living in Wheat Ridge compared to other communities in the Front Range, although this rating was similar to what we saw for communities across the nation. Residents also evaluated 22 different aspects of the community, and we saw ratings varied, generally ranging from 33% excellent or good to 79% excellent or good. The ones that we're looking at here are some of those that had the largest increases from 2015 to 2018. Of the 22, about half were stable over time, but we did see 12 items that increased. And we saw one item, which was the availability of affordable quality housing, decreased. It was the second lowest rated item, and it was lower than what we saw in most communities across the nation and in the Front Range, but this is definitely an item in the Front Range that we see getting a lower quality rating in the last several years. That has been trending down and has been something that many communities are having a hard time tackling and figuring out. So those 22 items were able to be compared to the nation, and again, mostly those items were rated similar to the national benchmark. 2 items were rated higher, which were recreational opportunities and availability of paths and walking trails. And we saw about 8 that received lower ratings, some of which included the overall quality of natural environment, shopping opportunities, and the availability of affordable quality childcare. When compared to the Front Range, again, we saw a lot of similarities in the ratings that Wheat Ridge residents gave to these characteristics. We did see 3 that got ratings that were higher than the Front Range. That included availability of paths and walking trails, availability of affordable quality housing, and of affordable quality food. We saw 5 that had ratings that were lower than the Front Range benchmark, again, some of which were air quality, shopping opportunities, and opportunities to attend cultural events. We asked about perceptions of safety in and around the community, and generally people felt safe. About 7 in 10 said that they felt very or somewhat safe in each of these areas in Wheat Ridge. And these assessments were generally stable from the prior survey year. However, we did see safety in neighborhoods increased, while safety on roadways decreased. Service delivery in Wheat Ridge is of high quality, with a few areas that might warrant some attention. We did see about 3/4 of respondents giving excellent or good ratings to the overall quality of services provided by the city. This is similar to what we've seen in past years, and it was similar to both benchmark comparisons. Separately, not on this slide, we did ask residents to evaluate the 22 individual city services. 14 of those were rated as excellent or good by at least 60% of respondents, and most of those were similar to 2016. We did see some improvements for 4 services: street cleaning, public information services, street repair, and crime prevention. And 3 services saw a decline in ratings from 2015, which was animal control services and programs for seniors, as well as police emergency response. Again, those 22 city services could be compared to both the national and Front Range benchmarks. When compared to the nation, we had about 19 that were able to be compared, and most of them, again, were similar. 5, however, were lower. That included municipal court, public information services, policing services, building inspections, and youth programs and services. Compared to the Front Range, a similar pattern. Most were similar, but we did see 4 that were lower, many of which were also lower when compared to the nation. So the municipal court, public information, and policing services. However, when compared to the Front Range, maintenance of existing city parks was also lower. We did an analysis to look at how ratings of quality compared to ratings of importance, and this can help pinpoint a little bit more for staff and elected officials where there might be a disparity in how people view services as more important but of lower quality. It might be an area for you to investigate, do some further research, look at secondary data that you already have to see if those areas warrant more attention from you. We use median ratings across all the services to create kind of 4 quadrants where generally ratings will fall out. The axis there for the importance was 74%. So if the rating was 74% or more, it would be considered of higher importance. If it was lower than 74%, it would be lower importance. For quality, it was 64%. So the upper left corner are those that were deemed of higher importance and lower in quality in 2016. And the services that you can see that maybe you can see are red are ones that were lower than the national benchmark. And again, you want to look where maybe some of them are trending down, none of these were, or are lower compared to either your peers that you consider more your peers, the Front Range, or the nation. And those may be areas where you may want to focus some additional attention. City government performance improved from 2015 to 2018. We saw evaluations of the overall performance of Wheat Ridge government rebound to levels seen prior to 2015. About 2/3 gave excellent or good ratings in 2018. And there is not a benchmark comparison available for this item. But we did have another number of improvements in different aspects of government performance. The ones that you can see with those dark arrows are areas of performance that improved from 2015 to 2018. Where we could make comparisons to the benchmark, mostly ratings were similar, except we did see that informing residents on major issues within the community was rated lower than both the Front Range and the national benchmark. City employees also were generally rated positively. About 4 in 10 respondents indicated they had had contact with a city employee in the 12 months prior to the survey. And these rates of contact were on par with other communities in the Front Range, but lower than what we see across the nation. At least 7 in 10 of those who had contact gave excellent or good reviews to their interactions with city employees. The 3 aspects here are ones that we saw improve from 2015 to 2018. And generally, when compared to the benchmark, the evaluations of interactions with city employees, their knowledge, courtesy, responsiveness, making the resident feel valued, and their overall impression largely were similar. However, we did see that ratings of knowledge and responsiveness were lower than both the Front Range and national benchmarks. We had several new questions on the survey in 2018 related to policing, housing, and homelessness. We'll first talk a little bit about priorities for the police department. There were 2 questions asking residents to help prioritize different resources or services for the police department either in the next 12 months or the next 2 years. Here we're looking at the question that's asking about the next 2 years. More than half generally felt it was a high priority for additional training for police officers to deal more effectively with mental health issues and to add surveillance cameras to high crime areas. We also asked about the importance of 7 other priorities for the police department in the next 12 months, and the most important was 69% saying it's essential that this be a priority for the police department is solving violent crimes. We gauged resident opinion about homelessness within the community, and overall most felt that it was a problem. About 6 in 10 said it was a major or moderate problem, with another 3 in 10 feeling that it is a minor problem. We had them evaluate the importance of the city contributing funding to community organizations that would help serve these populations, and asked them how important a variety of programs or services were in the community. And 8 in 10 felt that mental health programs and substance abuse programs were the most important for city to contribute funding. Respondents gave their opinions about short-term rentals in Wheat Ridge. And 3 of these policies related to short-term rentals had more support than opposition. So here you can see on the left, we have the percent strongly or somewhat support. On the right, strongly or somewhat opposed. And those of you who can do some quick head math probably see that those don't total to 100%. That's because we had a neutral category. So the percentage that you see missing are those who said neither support nor oppose. They felt somewhat indifferent about those. But these 3 definitely had more people supporting than opposing them. Collecting a lodging tax, which also was something that we asked about, had slightly more supporters, but there was a very strong proportion of opposers, 44% supported versus 35% opposed. Limiting the number of days a short-term rental could be rented had about equal proportions of support and opposition, about 1/3 each, and requiring the property owner to live in the house and rent only a room had the most opposition. 45% opposed that versus 25% supporting that. We also asked, as you've heard a little bit about tonight, about building heights here in Wheat Ridge. And we did see 61% of residents saying that they supported bulk plane regulations in general. About 53% supported expanding the current bulk plane regulations to other zones within the city. And we also asked if the city should maintain the current residential building heights, which is set currently at 35 feet in single-family zones, and if they should maintain that in the new infill for existing neighborhoods, or if it should be further restricted. About 54%, so just over half, said that it was that they would prefer the city maintain current building heights, and about 23% said that they would support further limiting it or restricting it, but another 23% said that they weren't sure how to answer the question. They answered don't know to that question. So more information. I know the city has done another survey on bulk plans and building heights, and maybe that information can be looked at with the citizen survey in mind as well. But it sounds like there may be some additional education that might need to be done so residents have a good idea about what those mean and how those impact their neighborhoods. Residents are definitely interested in allowing accessory dwelling units in the city. 53% supported allowing those in Wheat Ridge. We had 23% say that they felt neutral about it, and another 24% opposed allowing ADUs within the city. A strong majority of residents felt it was essential or very important for those ADUs to be architecturally compatible with the existing home if they were allowed. And a similar proportion, 69%, said that the city should limit the number of people allowed to live in the ADU. Some of the additional topics that were covered in the survey that are noteworthy relate to economic development. We asked residents to rate their level of agreement with 6 different statements about different efforts the city could take in regards to economic development. We saw that at least 3/4 of residents agreed with each of the statements, and most felt the city should promote efforts to revitalize business areas, the business corridors, as well as housing areas within the community. These levels of agreement were similar to what we saw in 2015, but we did see that more residents in 2018 felt that the city should revitalize business corridors. We also had a new question on the 2018 survey about environmental sustainability and which areas the city should focus on as it develops its plans and goals around environmental sustainability. We had many items, many more, 12 areas. We see 6 here. These are the ones that receive the highest ratings of importance related to the areas on which the city should focus. And most felt it was important for the city to focus on these 6 areas, at least 7 and 10. Residents felt it was relatively less important that the city encourage biking or walking instead of automobile use and to start a composting program. That's all I have for you tonight. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. We'll open this up then to council for questions. Mr. Matthews.
Thank you. I have a lot of questions here. I'm going to answer a couple and let the other councilors ask, then I'll come back. In general, and I'm going to start out with that, I like the survey and I think you did a good job. But unfortunately, I think we only did half a job. For instance, just over half believe that the extent to which elected officials act in the best interest of the community was excellent or good. I would like to know what they liked about us and what they didn't. There was a statistic here, the majority of the people felt that we were headed in the right direction. I don't have any idea what that means. Do they want more rental? Do they want more ownership? Do they, I think we need to start drilling down then on some of these questions to find out specifically. In this last issue, you talked here about revitalization. 85% were wanting to help revitalize businesses and revitalize homes, and I think it's a good idea. But the pregnant question there is, how many tax dollars are you willing to put out in order to pursue those policies? I think that's, how do we finance it? I think questions like those are the other half of the equation that at some point in time we need to address somehow, and I think it would be of value to us to pursue how we really drill down on some of those objects. And with that, I'll quit for right now.
Okay, additional questions from council? Mr. Rand?
Thank you. I do have a question. Well, thanks for all the work with the survey. I mean, I think it gives us a lot of good feedback and a lot of places to start where we need to improve. My concern is, and it always has been, the height restriction. I know we went through this a couple years ago trying to figure that out. I would like to, and I think you recommended maybe doing another survey, or I'm open to options here, to reaching out to more of our homeowners in the R1C area, R2 area, or just in the community in general to find out exactly how they feel. A lot of them were not aware of the conversation we had 2 years ago, weren't even aware of the survey now, and I think it's only fair and just that we reach out to them even more and have more conversations on this. So I would like to, if I can, just get a consensus or a feel of who would support just having more conversations and maybe considering a 30-foot height restriction, not dictating architectural design or anything, but really listening. I mean, there's new citizens that came tonight that I hadn't heard from, even 2 years ago. So I would like to continue that conversation and not close the door on that.
Mr. Matthews?
I was.
Thought you was kind of asking for a consensus.
Okay,
there.
so we have Mr.
Just to
Matthews.
continue the conversation at another study session.
Can I just ask clarification?
Ms. Davis?
So I guess my question is, or clarification is, I thought we already agreed that this was going to be a continued discussion, and a lot of it has to do with like the revitalization strategy and those types of things. So I don't know that any of us has said the discussion's off the table. I thought it was all kind of a part of the bigger plan. It was my understanding. So it was something, I guess for consensus, I thought we made that consensus in the past.
Mr. Pond?
Yeah, I won't vote for this consensus tonight for the specific reason that I still feel that this needs to be brought up in the NRS and be a part of a number of things, not elevated and set apart special. That's, I think, the mistake we've already made by getting people out of order, getting a very small group of people engaged and missing the larger picture. So I agree, this is important. We should keep talking about it. I think we've already decided that. I think we're going to talk about that, but I would prefer to talk about it in the context of the NRS. I will not support this consensus.
Ms. Hoppe?
I agree that this consensus just kind of takes it kind of out of step. We also need to talk about the fact that the 35 feet is in the city charter, and if we want to really address our zoning, then we need to take it out of the city charter and let zoning play the picture in our community. So I would like for this to be part of a whole conversation instead of just drilling down and taking one piece out.
Mr. Fitzgerald?
I'm going to repeat what already has been said. I'm not going to vote for this either because we have had previous discussions about looking at this whole picture holistically. And when we do the NRS, we're going to have a lot of public involvement. So I think that's a topic that can be involved, with our public discussion that's going to happen. But we're going to have tons of public involvement around the generalized picture when we do that.
Okay, Ms. Duran?
Yes, well, I wasn't aware that we were going to continue the conversation, but if we are, I just want to make sure that we're going to be diligent, and if we're going to move forward with more conversation through the NRS, and there's going to be more opportunity for input, that's all I want. So as long as we're on the same page on that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Additional comments or questions about the survey? Ms. Hoppy?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you for all of the hard work that went into this and the way that you break everything out. I think it's, for those who haven't had an opportunity to see it yet, it's something that we can't necessarily just kind of summarize totally, because there's all kinds of information you can pull out of it, and you can go and look at each question and how it was answered by each district, so you can see how the districts feel about certain topics. And I think taking this information on top of the work we did at our retreat and putting this in with our city goals that we have identified really gets us in a strong map to move down the road. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Pond?
Yeah, I'll echo most of that. Thank you for the effort. I have just a couple general comments and then a question. Generally, I think it's good news. I think that we always want to see more participation, and I know people yearn to be a participant in the survey. However, when we're doing these scientifically, and I think it's very important that we do, that's kind of a randomized process, and so I think that's important. I will make a note, renters are residents, and I think that in different contexts we can talk about rental and rental rates and those things, and I think the NRS is a platform to do that again. I'd be careful to in some ways, think of them as lesser. I think when they call the police, our police show up, or they should. They likely drive on our roads, and a number of other things like that. So, and by the way, they seem to take the time to fill out surveys and seem committed to do that. This was not a small survey. There's a lot of thought involved in that, and 46% of the folks who chimed in were renters, and I think they should be at least applauded for making a commitment to try to participate. We can deal with the other issues of rental and rental rates, I think, in a more appropriate way through the NRS. Just for clarification, and this is my question, I think when we first got the proposal, it was 3,000. We, council, I think, and folks maybe on that side of the table, requested, initiated a conversation that night. Could we increase it? And we did by 1,500. Regardless, and my question is just about why, again, and this is repeating something that you did months ago, but why that is actually valid science for survey inside of a community that has over 30,000 people.
Sure. Great question. And I'm glad you asked it, because it wasn't something that I necessarily got into in my presentation. So it's broadly the beauty of statistics, but to take it down, it can be very resource intensive, and it was resource intensive to increase your sample size to 1,500, meaning that it costs a lot of money to mail surveys. We mail surveys because we feel that it is the best representation of opinion. Self-administered surveys as opposed to phone surveys, which also are not inexpensive to complete these days, and tend to get much lower response rates than mailed surveys. Mail surveys tend to elicit more honest feedback because you are completing the survey by yourself at home versus on the phone with someone whom you're speaking with, and maybe subconsciously feel like you need to give more positive responses. So we do mailed surveys for that reason. But the reason that 3,000 or 4,000 surveys mailed, which would garner 1,100-ish responses. A lot of the surveys we only mail to 1,600 households in communities that are larger than Wheat Ridge, and we hear from 300 or 400 residents. But we take a lot of steps to make sure that those results, the people that we hear from, are going to be representative of the entire community. So you see nationwide a lot of these polls that are done of 1,000 Americans that are supposed to represent millions of Americans, and it's because we take into account the fact that we know that renters actually under-respond to surveys. We know that people of color under-respond to surveys. We know that younger people never respond to surveys. So, we take a lot of steps in order to try and reach that, one of which the city did this year is completing the survey online. There were a lot more younger people who responded to the survey online than those who were older. So it's one way to bring in their voice. We randomly sample using the United States Postal Service delivery sequence file, which contains every valid address within the community. We randomly select the addresses within the community to complete the survey. We actually oversample renters because we know they under-respond. And if you look, once you're able to find the report, in the back we actually have a table that shows, it's called the waiting table, and it shows you what the census data says for adults 18 years or older within the community. Who responded, who did we hear from, and once we tried to match the respondent profile to the demographic profile of all residents within the community, what did that look like? And I think it was closer to 19% of renters actually responded, but in the community, renters represent about 45% of all adults. So we want to make sure that the people who tend to respond less, their voices are heard. The people who tend to respond more, maybe their voices are brought down a little bit. Women, older adults, homeowners, they tend to respond at higher rates to surveys. So if we good survey researchers will statistically weight the data to make sure that you're balancing out those voices of people who we know will over-respond or under-respond to surveys. And so we take a lot of those into consideration. We also make sure that the proportions of households in each council district that we hear back from matches as closely as possible what we know to be true within the community.
Thank you. Mr. Matthews.
If I just heard what you said right, you said homeowners, which generally tend to be longer time residents, tend to over-respond, so you cut down their numbers, and renters, which tend to be more transient or transitory, you raise their numbers. Now, does that not in itself skew your results?
That's a good question. So the kind of thought behind weighting the survey results is that these people will tend, like groups of people tend to respond similarly to surveys. And so we take into account many different demographics. So if you look at the weighting, I don't have it in front of me, but usually the kinds of variables we weight by are gender, age, housing unit type or tenure, which is rent versus own, race or ethnicity, and then often if we are doing geographic comparisons, we weight by that distribution within the community to make sure it's representative. So a lot of those are taking into account, and yes, you're correct in the fact that if someone responded and they said they were a homeowner, and we have 54% of all adults within the community are homeowners, but we heard from 78%, then yes, we want to bring those voices down to what they should be within the community, because it would be an inaccurate representation of what all residents think, because we only heard from 19% of renters, but they should represent 46% of the community. I think that number's right. We do bring up their voice. I'm not saying that we, doubled their opinions. It's fractions. So if that renter is a 70-year-old female, the 70-year-old and the female part kind of lower her response also. So there's the balancing act that takes into account. So, you know, if I respond to the survey, I'm a 39-year-old white female who owns a home. I am one of the people who are most likely to respond to surveys, and because I'm a researcher, I always will. For me, maybe my response, instead of counting as 1, would count as 0.9 as opposed to 1. And if a 18-year-old male who rents responds to the survey, instead of counting as 1, his would count as 1.07, if that makes sense. And so it gets a little complex. I'm happy to have additional conversation with you about it. But generally speaking, to help set your mind at ease also, looking at the weighted responses compared to unweighted responses, the results don't tend to differ that much, maybe by 1% or 2. It's not dozens of percentages, or when we look at those comparisons, it is a very small adjustment that is made, but that adjustment allows us to say that those results are representative.
Thank you. Mr. Urban.
Thank you very much. I appreciate all the work that was done on this survey, and I appreciate the fact that we were able to reach out to more residents than not as it relates to the total number of recipients. My question is on the areas where we, where we didn't do as well as other municipalities in the area of municipal courts, for instance, we're below the comparison cities. But then when we look at the crime victimization and reporting, it indicates that we are sort of in the middle range of other municipalities, and that majority of the people did not have a household member who was a victim of a crime and who did not report a crime to the police. So when the majority of the individuals report or filling out the survey aren't involved in the municipal court, but then they also have a less than favorable view of the municipal court, what's their basis for that view of the municipal court, or how do we get that less than positive view when they're not even interacting with that department?
So for those items, I have to look back, but you're right, I do believe everyone evaluated them. My guess is that they probably have a pretty high percentage of people also saying don't know when compared to the benchmark. But I believe another council member, I'm not sure which one, I apologize, mentioned about wanting to dig deeper, and that this only paints part of the picture, and that's very true. It's very hard to dig deep enough and not have the survey be as long as this report. So we have to be considerate. Ideally, these surveys are top level. They give you a sense of overall how people feel broadly about all the services that you provide. And what our goal is in presenting the results to you and writing these reports is to pinpoint areas that may be areas where you need to look a little bit deeper into resident opinion, either through focus groups, through another survey, through secondary data that you might have. And we, unfortunately, these kinds of surveys answer the whats, but not the whys. So we don't know why people respond the way that they do or what necessarily they're thinking about. But largely we see that people tend to think about these items similarly with some variation. So these kinds of questions, based on the fact that we have so many benchmark comparisons, are very uniform across a number of surveys, but needing to find out what people are thinking about when they're answering, those kinds of questions, there needs to be a little bit more conversation with residents if areas of concern are brought up in the results. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I guess so. And then as it relates to that particular item within the municipal court, who does like going to court, or what's the, not to say that it's a pleasant experience. Well, but in some of these instances, a positive response isn't necessarily a goal of the city. It's just it's court. No one likes going there, and you're not going to get a good result or whatever. You may not appreciate the outcome.
And that's where the benchmarks really come into play. Is how so oh my gosh, our traffic rating is really low. Guess what? It's the lowest rating in every community. So similar kind of thing with courts. People who have to go to court generally aren't happy about it, so you aren't ever going to get even 50% giving you positive ratings is usually generally pretty good. So that's where the benchmarks really come into play and your comparison to yourself over time. If you see a trend down or up, something's happening, and maybe that will alert you to it. So that's one place where the benchmarks can help us see how you're comparing in other areas where those ratings tend to just be low in most communities.
Thank you. And I'd just say overall on the survey that I can look at in 4 different categories, those areas which we're doing well, those areas where we can improve, and then also those areas where we all somewhat agree on a particular issue, and then those areas where we disagree. So I think on those areas where we can agree on a particular issue that we should try to move forward with coming up with some policies around those particular issues, given the feedback of the survey, folding that into the NRS process, and then as well as within our strategic plan would give us a way to move forward on some of those particular issues with the ADUs and the short-term rentals. So I'd like to see us do that if at all possible.
Thank you. Mr. Fitzgerald.
This is not a question. I'm sorry, I don't have a question, but I'm looking at figure 8, and that is a figure that compares us to ourselves over time. And I'm looking at this, and we've shown improvement in almost every area that we have control over. Some things where there hasn't been improvement we just can't affect, like air quality, for example, and affordable housing. So I just want to say we've worked very hard to make our city a better city, and although it's very small, I will agree it's small, and we certainly have a lot of stuff to do, we have shown improvement, and I like that.
Thank you. Well, would you like to go, Ms. Dozeman?
Yes, thank you. So I just wanted to thank you and your staff as well as our city staff for putting this together. I know it's a lot of hard work. I am a little concerned that we're alienating and somewhat discounting a large population of our residents by giving the notion that rentals or renters do not hold as much weight as homeowners, given that we have almost nearly 50% of our population choosing to rent here, and being able to afford to rent here, I think is a big deal, and I don't think that we should necessarily push that aside. I also want to just be cognizant of this being a starting point. This is a starting point for this conversation. This is a way to quantify and get a sample population of how the entire citizenry is feeling about the direction that we're going in with the city. And I am, for one, really excited to tackle some of these topics that have been reoccurring over the last several years. We've seen ADUs, bulk plane height restrictions, and many forms come up in topics of conversation, and it's really time that we be diligent in addressing these and finding solutions and having all of you be a part of this conversation moving forward. So this survey was just a small sample of our population, and we worked hard to get a larger amount of people involved and have their voice heard, whether they're homeowners or not in this community. And I just really appreciate all of the hard work that's going into this, and I'm really excited to tackle the NRS. So I really hope that you apply, by the way.
Thank you. Mr. Matthews?
Hi, thank you for bearing with me. I apologize for the shotgun approach, but I've got notes over 136 pages, and I'm trying to not make everyone wait while I page through. Can you please explain to me what's going on page 67 of the survey? It doesn't seem to have it be complete. I'm wondering if part of the page got cut off, at least for what I have. The table 51.
So that is for that question, residents could write in a different reason. So we gave a list of reasons as to why they may consider an ADU, which is in table 50 on the prior page, for an elderly family member, disabled family member, and then they could say someone else, and they could write in their own words what that would be. So this is what people wrote to that question.
So that's why there's no percentages per se there.
Yes.
I'll go ahead and yield the floor until I find another note.
Okay, is there any other discussion or questions? Well, I would like to close this topic unless we have other points of discussion with my thanks to NRC for putting the survey together. I thought it was very thorough. As for everyone's understanding, as was mentioned by Mr. Pond, we increased the sample size by 50% from 3,000 to 4,500. I think we got a good representative sample. I think the way to look at this is a tool. This is a tool for discussion, like Ms. Dozman indicated, and I think it's will inform part of our thinking and give us some good insights as to what a survey sample thinks about a lot of these issues. And there were a lot of comments from the audience about what we're going to do about a number of issues: ADUs, single night occupancies, and bulk plane and density and height, and a lot of issues. And I think this is a really good starting point, or at least a good marker along the way to have that discussion. So thank you very much for presenting this. Thank you to all the citizens who came and spoke about it. So I appreciate it. Thank you. We're going to move to item number 2, which is the Wadsworth Value Engineering Report. We have some presenters joining
We
us.
do.
Mr.
Scott Brink,
Goff?
our Public Works Director, will
Terrific.
introduce the item, I believe, and then Mark Westberg is also here to give a presentation.
Yeah, I'll turn it over to Mark here. He's got a brief little PowerPoint to talk about the value engineering exercise and what came out of it, and then we'll open it up for questions and discussion.
Good. So a brief PowerPoint.
So I know I was just back here about a month and a half ago, so you're stuck with me again showing my favorite picture of why we're here, because Wadsworth is a disaster for traffic. And now that I know it's a real disaster for traffic. So we had a value engineering workshop. We're going to talk about that tonight. We're going to talk about the outcomes of that workshop, what our anticipated savings are. Some of these numbers are pretty approximate for a lot of reasons. What our planned public outreach is going to be for those items, and some schedule updates, and then what our next steps are. So the VE team was made up of 2 folks from AECOM, one of which was our facilitator who came from Canada, a very nice young lady who does this for a living. All she does is run VE teams. And then another gentleman from the local office. We had one gentleman from the HDR team, our other consultant working on Wadsworth. We had one person from city staff. He was literally the only engineer left that was not working on Wadsworth, so we volunteered him. And then 3 CDOT staff came up and did a great job for us. One of their structures folks, a traffic person, and then because they were all free. We had to pay the other 3 folks, but the other 4 were all free, so that worked out really well for us. We had the workshop from, it literally was just a 3-day, super intensive, just brain dump on what we can do this project. The presentation was made on May 3rd in the morning to a group of us, including other representatives from the team that's working on Wadsworth, both CDOT and FWA. And then we had a follow-up meeting. We all sort of, CDOT took the list and looked at them. We took a list of proposals. Follow-up meeting on May 21st, just to at a staff level to sort of come to an agreement on what we were going to move forward with and what we weren't going to move forward with.
So Mark, just to clarify, the VE team was all people that haven't been involved with the project. The whole idea is to bring a fresh set of eyes to the project.
Fresh set of eyes. People that just really don't know much. We gave about a 2-hour presentation. Gave a 2-hour presentation to sort of try to get them up to speed on what we've been doing on WADS and where we've landed on things. And they came up with some really interesting ideas. We're talking about several of those tonight. Things that I just wouldn't have thought. So really great to have this fresh set of eyes. Look at it. We think we found we've maybe closed our funding gap by half, which is really exciting for us on this project. So the first thing that we had was our 2-way cycle track. So that what we had previously proposed on the east side of Wadsworth, I'm just showing the east side here, was a 10-foot 2-way cycle track, a 1-foot buffer, and then an 8-foot sidewalk. That's what we've had in this thing from the very beginning as a way to try to accommodate both bikes and pedestrians in that what we think of as the most congested section of Wadsworth from 35th up to 44th. The VE team looked at that. They looked at all the data we've got. They looked at all the things, and what they proposed that we do is to replace this 19 feet of stuff up here with a 12-foot shared use path, multi-use path, if you will, where we've got an extra wide sidewalk that's, what we built on Kipling recently was 10 feet wide, and so this would be another 2 feet beyond what we have on Kipling, and it would still be separated from the street by the amenity zone. So the idea is to try to combine those spaces. And in talking with several folks with the headquarters, the CDOT headquarters, bike ped advocate down there, he said, well, you know, it would have been great to have it, but we're probably okay without it. You're just not going to have that much sort of commuter bicycle traffic on 3/4 of a mile of Wadsworth to really justify having a cycle track. So we were all excited to have it, and I think Rachel echoed that comment too from our local bicycle advocates. We thought it was a great idea to have it, but it's probably not absolutely necessary. And you'll see at the end of the presentation the money we're going to save by not doing it. We think the number's higher than what the VE team came up with. And there's also just some other impact that we'll talk about as we sort of get into that. So that two-way cycle track was going to be from 35th to 44th was all. Because north of 44th, we thought the pedestrian traffic was going to drop off enough, it wouldn't really be that big of a concern. There are some parallel routes for cyclists, especially on the east side. There's Pierce Street, which is a dedicated bike facility for a lot of the city. And then Upham Street also serves as a really good parallel route. I'm not sure what route Scott rides when he rides into work from Golden, but there are some other pretty good routes to get people along Wadsworth on the east side. The west side's a little more disconnected, but again, the cycle track was going to be on the east side. Some of the big things it does is we've got a retaining wall along the berm that's by the Morningside Apartments. That's going to be able to be a lot less tall. And then we've got some pretty nice screen walls and landscaping in front of the shopping center where Safeway and McDonald's and Boston Market are, that with the cycle track, we had to remove all that. We basically have our sidewalk right up against their parking lot. By removing that 7 feet that is taking the 19 feet down to 12 feet, it looks like we're going to, and right now we're still very conceptual in this, but it looks like we could probably not just save those screen walls, but also save the landscaping out in front. We've got to see how much wiggling we can do on our road and still have it be drivable and safe and everything, but it looks like we can save a lot of those things. And we had planned on some retaining walls along the Big Lots parking lot because of how quickly it drops off. All those things just get smaller and cheaper and that kind of thing. So we think this is, from a staff standpoint, both we and CDOT are very supportive of this particular thing of sort of converting these separate facilities into a shared facility. Yeah, so you save 7 feet of right-of-way. You also save 7 feet of material down. You're saving 7 feet of demolition. We've got some properties that we're going to be really heavily impacted on their parking lots that we're looking at. We might be able to maybe not impact them much at all. Like we were taking out all of their parking from the building. Now we're only taking out one side of it or something like that. So we're still looking at what we can do with this design, but we're continuing to look at that and evaluate that. So the next thing was value engineering concepts 4 and 5. So again, this is what we've sort of been showing as we go along here. We had 9.5-foot tree lawns on both sides, and then we had 6-foot minimum medians in the middle of the street. And because those are just sort of the standards, you know, and if you want to have really nice healthy trees and do all that stuff, you want to have pretty close to 10 feet. You want to have a 6-foot median to provide the most protection. And that's sort of the standard. But they do allow you to reduce those. And these are some of the CDOT traffic guys that proposed this particular one with the medians. And so what we're proposing now is to reduce those tree lawns to 8 feet. What that'll do, if you want to have a healthy tree, you've just got to have enough space for the root system to grow, is we'll probably spread our trees out just a little bit more than we would otherwise. With the 9.5-foot, we'll space them another 5 or 10 feet apart in order to give them that root zone that they need. but it allows us to reduce on both sides of the street 1.5 feet of right-of-way. Now, the 8 feet's kind of a minimum, because then we start running into, we can't have the trees too close to the roadway because they start to affect clear zones if somebody runs off the road with a car. I'd rather have them run into a tree than a pedestrian, but the guys that are in charge of the roads really worry about the cars running into things. So, and then the medians can go to a minimum of 4 feet, and that allows you to put a 24-inch wide sign and still have the clearance on the side that if a truck goes by, they don't clip it with their mirrors. So those are the things we're looking at. And these two proposals, for most of the corridor, reduce that width by another 5 feet. So in parts of the corridor, we've reduced our width by 12 feet. In other parts, we've reduced it by 5 feet. No, I didn't redraw this on this one. No, I just threw these up and changed the numbers at the bottom. So it does shrink by 5 feet on that part of it. So the next part's a little bit complicated, and we don't have a great sketch of this because we're combining a couple of different proposals. So right, what we have today at the office building at 4800 Wadsworth, this is the multi-story building up at the very north end of the corridor. This is 47th Avenue. This is where 48th Avenue currently winds around and heads along, and this is where the hill goes down. This is the Johnson Park entrance, just to get everybody oriented on where we are. So what we currently have today there is this very sharp turn, which the fire department has a hard time doing. That comes around here. With adding the mini zone and the sidewalk through here, we were doing a radius that would work for the fire department that meets their standards, and so we end up eating up a bunch of this parking lot. We were trying to align these two streets so that we might maybe get a signal there someday. In the process, we've got to buy this house from this gentleman. We have a big impact on their parking lot, and this road, this frontage road, gets a lot closer to this building, which is a real concern for the gentleman that owns this building. And so that we conveyed all that to the VE team. They looked at these alternatives, and they had a bunch of really interesting ideas on what to do with this. So the first thing would be to add a cul-de-sac at the end of 48th Avenue and just not have 48th Avenue connect to Wadsworth. It's a very difficult connection to make at this location because of grade and also because of how quickly this third lane drops off and becomes the on-ramp for I-70. So it's very hard in thinking about trying to eliminate this frontage road by doing something different. So the first thing they looked at was, let's put a cul-de-sac there. We think we already have to buy this house because of the retaining wall we've got to put in. So let's use that ground we're buying from the house just to add a cul-de-sac or some kind of a turnaround. So the next thing they looked at, which was I think was VE number 12, was to what if we put sort of a little slip lane so people could at least do right in onto 48th. They couldn't get off of 48th onto Wadsworth. They could at least get onto 48th from Wadsworth. And let's face it, if they're getting onto Wadsworth, they're leaving our fair town and shopping somewhere else, which we don't want to encourage. So this would allow them to maybe turn right onto Wadsworth. We got to look at the traffic and how we sign all of that because of again that on-ramp that goes right onto I-70. But that was another thing. And so then we would move this entrance. It's not really an entrance. Their driveway is actually bad. They've got a couple of driveways, but we sort of not rebuild this and put a right in, right out entrance here, right at the front of this building to serve this office building. And based on what we've got so far is we're pretty sure we can allow a left in also. There's going to be enough gaps in traffic because of the signals in the crossover signal at 45th or 46th Avenue associated with the CFIs that we think there'll be enough gaps that we really could allow a left in at this location very safely. We just couldn't allow a left out because of the hill and the sight distance and all those things. What we would do at 47th would then be a similar concept. It would become a right in, right out, and we could also allow a left in because there are, again, enough gaps because the signal at the bottom of the hill for the ramps. We think we could basically turn both of these access points into three-quarter access points and maybe get a right in on 48th Avenue. So this is a really big change for this part of the world, but it saves us having to buy this house and rebuilding this road and demoing their parking lot and restriping it. There's just the ripple effect of what this saves us, and it actually moves everything a little farther away from this office building, which will make those west lower floors a lot more comfortable for the tenants that might be in there. So we've looked at this as another option of what we can do. Yeah, we think we can provide that still for those left turns. And the movements aren't real high. There's not a lot of people turning left. In talking with both the owner and the tenants of this office building, their biggest thing is we want people to get to and from I-70. So we want them to be able to turn left into our place and turn right to go back to I-70. That's their biggest concern traffic-wise, is because this really is sort of a regional thing. People get there and go and come from I-70. So that was a big concern of theirs, and we're pretty sure we can do all this. We're looking at those options still. We might have to maybe move, if we get an issue with the next thing I'm going to talk about, which is the retaining walls, we might have to move this 3/4 movement over to this driveway maybe for them and move some other things around, but we think we can still do all that. One of my biggest pushes was to try to maybe get a signal here someday in the future. So I called our traffic engineer when they proposed this, is that how close are we to even getting close to meeting warrants in 2040? Well, in 2040, we'd have to increase the traffic by another 25% on those side streets in order to get a warrant. And so it's just not really realistic that we'll ever meet warrants for those side streets at this location. CDOT is just not going to put another signal at Wadsworth if we don't meet warrants. Now, we did have a quick conversation. My biggest concern up here right now is with this proposal is that the nearest potential pedestrian crossing point is at the bottom of the hill where the ramps are and all the way back at 44th Avenue. And is there somewhere in here that we could maybe get a peg crossing? We've got some wider medians just to the south of this location that we might be able to go ahead and get a pedestrian-only signal, similar to what's on Sims Avenue, just south of 6th Avenue, where it's the 3-headed design, and it only goes off when the pedestrians are present. The CDI guy said, don't write this down, but we can talk about that. So, don't write this down, Jenna. Okay. So that's kind of where we are with this particular sort of group of VE things. So the next thing was the retaining walls on the north end. These are very expensive. To replace that western wall is about $1 million. Honestly, we looked at just buying the house and grading it out. It costs about the same, but I just soon not buy somebody's house. And so we're talking about this wall at this location. This wall alone is $1 million just to rebuild that wall. Now, there's also a wall on the other side, which is going to end up being a little bit shorter. The big cost comes from, as we widen Wadsworth through here, this wall that's about 6 to 8 feet tall today ends up being 25 feet tall right up at the peak of the hill, which is right up where the house is up here. This wall ends up being about 15 feet tall. And they're right up against structures and stuff. So we had planned on doing caisson walls where you basically drill up like a 3-foot diameter hole, you put some steel in, you pour some concrete, you move ahead a little bit, you do the same thing. It's very labor intensive, it's very costly, and it takes a long time to build. And because we were getting so close to this house, we actually had to find a special drill rig that was small enough to fit in that space. So this was going to be a big deal to try to rebuild these walls. And so this is what that design was going to look like. So this was the big wall we had to build. This was the sidewalk with a narrow amenity zone because of just trying not to hit the house. This is our 3 lanes of traffic. This is the existing median width that's out there today. This is our 3 lanes of traffic going north. This is another wider amenity zone, and then this is our sidewalk, and this is the other wall over on the east side. So what this combination of 3 VE proposals, they had 3 things they talked about doing, and we sort of took all 3 of those things and melded them together, is we keep this wall that's down low, this is the existing wall, and then we maybe stick this, and then we move this curb, so it's out in front of where the normal house is. We move this curb so it's out in front of the wall. Our 3 lanes of traffic then just eat into the median. So we don't really have to change the curb for the northbound lanes, we don't think at this point. And so that allows us to, if we just stopped there, we just saved $1 million. But our thought is we want to go ahead and have that sidewalk on the west side, is to go ahead and put a sidewalk up on top of the existing wall and then build another wall for that sidewalk, which would be much shorter because now we're in the slope, we're not at the top of the slope. So this wall maybe is 6 to 8 feet tall, and there are a variety of construction methods you can use to build that wall, some of which you can actually make it look like natural stone that's been exposed for a long time with sculpted concrete and some things like that. So that would be the proposal on the west side. On the east side, then we would do the similar concept. Oh, the other thing too is that we can get by, this moves in all the way to here, because we've got a vertical separation now between the road and the sidewalk, so we don't have to have a horizontal separation for safety. We would need a railing or a parapet or something up here to keep someone from falling off on the road, but we wouldn't need that horizontal. We could have a vertical separation instead. We do the same thing on the east side, where again, we have to come back from the curb a little bit to build a short wall, and then we put the sidewalk up on top, we build the other wall. And this is how, as Rachel mentioned in her opening comments, I was listening upstairs, is how we can meet ADA. Right now, the road existing today is 8% down the hill. ADA slows out. If you try to do a wheelchair on 8%, you're going to smack your hands trying to slow down and be able to make it up. And so because we could ride up on top of these walls, we could actually meet ADA grades going down the hill. What we'd have to do when we hit the slope at the end is we'd have to put a couple of switchbacks in, go down 3 feet into the slope and come back in order to get back down to grade. But they wouldn't be really big dramatic things, and they wouldn't be super costly. So we think all of these things will still save us over what we're doing today, and we get the benefit of meeting ADA and making our entire route accessible all the way down to the creek. So the last thing I've got that we're going to talk about is reducing the sidewalk width. We've got a lot of stuff happening on that west side up at the north end. We've got the CM Dunn building where the Jefferson County Mental Health is, which formerly Arapahoe House. We've got to reduce our sidewalk width and amenity zone width there because of that being historical property. We've got to at the mid-century modern house, the Davis house, the bungalow, and then we're going to reduce it as we go over the hill for the wall. And so rather than having our sidewalks and amenity zones doing this all the way up, what we're proposing to do is pretty much from just north of the pawn shop where the Inramex building is, we would still have 8-foot amenity zone and 10-foot sidewalk on that side. We'd reduce it to a 2-foot amenity zone, similar to what we have on 44th Avenue, which is what we've got to do in front of those historical properties. And just keep the sidewalk width at 8 feet, that whole length all the way down until we get down to basically the Clear Creek Bridge. And our thought is that it just has a more consistent feel. Now, at the Davis house, which is the flat-roofed house there, we'd still have to shrink that sidewalk down in order to not hit the building. This new proposal, thought for this entire stretch is to have that be consistent just so that we're not, every other property will be jumping in and out and jumping in and out. That's just going to be hard to plow and maintain and just to be consistent on that part. It also provides a little bit of a cost savings because down here at Johnson Park, we do have a retaining wall that we have to build as we pass the Johnson Park entrance. It's a fill wall, so the wall's on the downhill side of the deal. So that's sort of what we're looking at possibly doing up at that north end. And so what all these things do for us is if we take out the cycle track, I think we save at least $1 million. They'd identified about $780,000 worth of savings just on right-of-way and construction of that. Looking at all the demo and the impacts and all those things, I think we're well north of $1 million on this particular one. For the next two, reducing the median and the amenity zone width, again, this is, we think is like a $2 million savings because we're saving that 5 feet for the entire 1.25 miles. It also reduces wall costs and a lot of other impacts that we've got on that. Again, the 47th, 48th Avenue access, we think that's probably about $1 million savings. And a lot of that is just not buying the house. I just sold my house for, it's not right on Wadsworth, but they're still going to get $100,000 for that house. And then when you factor in relocation costs and all the construction savings we got and everything else, we're going to be at around $1 million, we think, with changing those access points up at the north end. The north retaining walls, it's really hard to say because of all the things, the complexity of combining 3 VE proposals, but we think we're saving at least $500,000, probably not more than $1 million, but somewhere in that $500,000 to maybe $750,000 range on that particular set of proposals on the north retaining walls. And the other thing too on that is we just won't have this 3-foot way of people coming up the hill at 40 miles an hour, a 4-foot amenity zone, a 10-foot sidewalk, all at grade, and then a 25-foot wall sticking up there. It's going to be, we can make that a much more pleasing kind of thing because things will be spread out and a little less dramatic than a 25-foot wall. Reducing the sidewalk on the north end doesn't save us a ton of money. I think we saved maybe $50,000, a little bit more than $50,000 on that one. And then the two things I didn't talk about that we're okay with, but we're just going to do those during final design, is look at eliminating, ABC is aggregate base course, so it's just gravel under the sidewalk that was called for in the design right now, and we're going to look at that geotech report and dig a little deeper to see if we really need that. And then splitting the drainage system at the north end, there's an existing 40-inch pipe that runs down the hill and discharges into Johnson Park. We were going to remove that and just send all the water over to the east side. One of the ideas was let's keep the existing pipe and just build what we need to get the extra water across, and that'd be about a 36-inch pipe instead of a 60-inch pipe. So we think there's some fairly substantial savings in that also. So the bottom line is we think we've probably identified about $5 million in savings with all these proposals. Again, if we've got this from you all to move forward with all of these, and that closes our funding gap by about half. So we only have $5 million left to go. I was at a Dr. Cog TIP meeting today, and in talking with some of the folks there, we think Wadsworth is probably a good project to submit for a regional project with Dr. Cog. We think it's probably also a good project. We can also do a sub-regional along with that. And so if we sort of get $3 million from both of those, which is not a big ask for both of those pots of money, then we we've got a shot at closing our funding gap, and we'll know those answers here as we keep moving forward. So, so our outreach is, number one, we came to talk to you guys about this. We did talk to the bicycle advocates ahead of time just to make sure we weren't going to create an uproar in the background. We are going to have some individual meetings with the specific property owner. So the owner of that house has been kind of excited that we were going to buy him out because he gets to leave and just, his mother died about a year ago, and that was the reason they were in the house, and he doesn't think he can sell the house very easily with it being right on Wadsworth, so I've got to give him the bad news. We're not going to buy his house from him possibly. So we want to have a meeting with him, the owner of 4800 Wads, probably the cigar shop that's up there, have some individual meetings with folks that are most impacted by these designs. And then we want to have a set of block meetings, mostly because of the access changes up at the north end. And so our thought is we're going to have 2 meetings, one at 4 o'clock and one at 6 o'clock for people who want to come while they're at work and after work. And it's pretty much, we invite a big chunk of folks from 44th Avenue all the way up to our north end there. A couple of blocks deep in the neighborhood, because it's going to affect all these people the way they may or may not access Wadsworth. So we're going to hold those meetings. We hope to hold those meetings on June 13th. We've not sent a mailing out yet. We wanted to make sure that we had consensus from you all on moving forward with those proposals before we sort of set up that block meeting with that group of folks and meet with them and talk about what these changes are at the north end and how it might impact them and what their alternate route might be. So just the schedule, this is the schedule I shared with you back in mid-April. This is basically 1 month later, because it's going to take us about a month to incorporate all this stuff, than what I shared with you back then. So again, we're just hoping to start construction in about 2020. And then we still think this is going to take about 2 years. That really hasn't changed. So our big step right now is if we get consensus from you all tonight, is meet with those residents out there and the neighbors and the business owners, revise our conceptual plans, the design contract and the RFQ for the right-of-way consultant. We're going to get those before you in probably July and August to get those processes started. We've got to get our EA going and get that thing done and continue our SHPO mitigation that we've got with them. And then that's it. And I do have the table at the end here, just that summarizes. It's the same table that was in your packet. So we can use this as a talking point. We can go back to any of the slides you want to go back to or any of that kind of stuff.
Okay, well, Mark, thank you very much. That was a lot of information. Ms. Dozman.
Thank you. So one of my thoughts is the cul-de-sac at 48th. What are the other access points to Wadsworth? Would they have to go all the way to 44th?
They would have, if they're wanting to go north, they can actually snake through some local streets, like some of them probably do today, and pop out at 45th or 46th, or there's another 45th place or something. There's 3 streets from that neighborhood that access directly on the Wadsworth before you get to 44th. If they want to go left, they do have to go down to 44th, which a lot of them probably do today anyway, because it's really hard to turn left onto Wadsworth, even at that location. So, so yes, and Teller Street is a pretty good route that comes all the way from 48th all the way down. And then we have the new signal at Vance, which makes it much easier to turn out onto 44th if you're wanting to go a different direction. So at 44th and Vance. So we do have some options. We think this is going to be an impact on some people's traveling routes, but we think we have some good alternate routes that probably when we go to 6 lanes, they're going to have to use those anyway. It's going to be hard to turn left onto 44th or onto Wadsworth from the future street without a signal being there. We're just not going to get a signal out of CDOT anytime soon.
And I tried to find it, and I don't know if you know this offhand, but what is our pedestrian and bicycle count on the Wadsworth corridor? Do you know?
It's pretty low right now because we just don't have a lot of facilities for them to walk on. Out in front of Safeway, we have a lot of PEDs. I've seen some bikes, and like Rachel, I've seen some bikes actually riding in Wadsworth. I saw a guy riding down the hill in the southbound lanes who's riding against traffic. When a vehicle came, he jumped off his bike and jumped onto the thing and waited, and then rode down the hill. He wanted to go to Johnson Park, and there's not a way to get there today. So that's one of the things we might solve. So we don't have a lot of bike ped traffic up and down Wads in some areas because there's just nothing for them to ride or to walk on.
Mr. Matthews and then Mr. Urban.
Thank you. Can we go back to that slide of the north walls? Just for clarification, I'm in favor of all of these savings. Where on there is the existing wall? It says keep wall, but that looks like a little short wall.
So this is the existing wall, and the existing wall is only about 6 to 8 feet tall. As I drive by it, I've sort of been looking at it. I've been really focused in on it before because it's got all those bushes on the top of that slope. If we go back up, sorry, we'll go back up one more slide if I can do that really quickly. So this existing wall starts about 5 or 6 feet tall here and ends about 8 feet tall then on the end. But this slope, there's a lot of slope that comes back up this hill. So at the end, there's 25 feet from this corner of the fence down to the bottom.
Does it get taller if you go down over the hill?
The wall gets a little taller as you go down. It doesn't slope quite as steeply as Watts does.
Okay. I assume we're going to do something to refinish that then, so that it would match all the new construction and look
So
pretty.
at the bottom of this, we've got to put basically a Type 7 barricade, we call it Jersey barrier, kind of
Right.
a half thing, a little thing that's going to run back instead of flipping over and stuff. And so we've got to do that at the bottom. We can certainly do some things above that to get a fascia on that wall of some sort or another. Yeah, we don't want to have crappy old wall up against our nice, beautiful new wall, so we'll definitely do something there.
Okay, Mr. Urban.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With respect to VE12 and VE18, the 48th and 47th Avenue access, the way that I experience that intersection is that a significant number of the traffic that's coming off of Wadsworth is that left in, and they're turning around and then heading back north towards Arvada, and so that seems to be the majority of the movement in that intersection. And then if you were to line it up with the entrance to that property, it would seem you would encourage more people to use that property to turn around on, and I don't know that that's necessarily the best way. And so is there a U-turn available on that left-in lane right there on Wadsworth to go back towards Arvada, or how do you handle that
So with
traffic?
going to 3 lanes, that anywhere we have these breaks in the medians, we would allow U-turns. So this would be a great opportunity for U-turn for people that want to do that. Sort of the next chance heading south would be at the crossover signal, which would actually be a signalized U-turn at that point. So they would actually have a left turn signal where they could do a U-turn. With 3 lanes of traffic, most vehicles can pull it off, because at that point you're looking at like almost a 50-foot turning radius in order to do that. You can't do that in a U-Haul, because I tried the other day up in Arvada when I was moving. But in most vehicles, you can do a U-turn with 3 lanes of receiving traffic on the other side.
Okay, and then I guess just either offsetting that intersection away from the building's entrance, or some way to keep it from just flowing into the property would
Yeah,
be-
I think we could certainly just keep this existing point here and try to do something there, or we provide a new access point here into the parking lot. We'll certainly work with that building owner on what is going to be the best for them. We just sort of showed at this location it's easier to draw the little yellow arrows if they're separated a little bit more. So we can certainly look at that as we move forward.
And these are all separate options on the same graphic, right? You're not doing the cul-de-sac and that 3/4 access, or?
This would all sort of go together. So the idea is to not rebuild this frontage, is to remove the frontage road, and this little frontage road of what is 48th Avenue is to remove that. And so this becomes a 3/4 on this side, access to this building becomes a 3/4, and then we do the cul-de-sac and maybe a right turn coming in, if we can do that and not confuse people. We don't want people to turn on the 48th thinking they're getting on the I-70. So that's the trick that we've got to look at from a design standpoint. But that's what we're looking to try and do. It's sort of all of these things go together to eliminate needing to rebuild the frontage road.
So how do you have a cul-de-sac with traffic coming into it?
Comes in from the other side.
So it's that's a design issue we've got to work on. So it might almost become kind of roundaboutish, if you will. Again, we haven't really taken it much farther than just the idea. And maybe it's not a cul-de-sac. It might end up being more of a hammerhead kind of turnaround that we could put in there. That's something that will still meet fire department requirements, but still seems more street-like, and it's easier for people to turn around too. So.
You can still get use of the property, right?
And right, these driveways, the driveway to the cigar shop and the driveway to here would still be there also. So yeah, maybe this does become kind of like a roundabout at the end of the street that.
So then would 48th be blocked off there?
What's that?
Would 48th then be blocked off?
You wouldn't be able to drive off of 48th and get onto Wadsworth at this location. We might be able to allow people to get onto 48th from Wads, but if someone comes down here, they'd have to turn around and go back and go somewhere else.
Thank you.
Mr. Ann?
Thank you. Mark, did you reach out to the fire department, or have you yet?
We have not reached out. They're
Okay.
on the list of folks to talk to really, really quickly as soon as
Okay.
we're done talking with you guys. We wanted to run these by you first, and then we're going to reach out to West Metro and talk with them about, this is again a big change for them up there. I think the concern for the 48th Avenue thing, I doubt that fire responds by driving north on Wads. If they're coming from their Upham station, they probably take Upham to 44th and then jump over to Teller and shoot north on Teller. But we'll talk with them about how do they respond to this area.
Okay, great, thank you.
Wadsworth is not a great emergency route most of the time.
Mr. Fitzgerald?
Well, I was really going to ask about the same thing, because if you're worried about the fire department on the 47th Avenue turn, if you have the 47th and a half left in, right out, how does the fire truck turn in that one?
So if they're allowed to do a left in, the fire truck can pull in here and then they can pull on into 47th and they can pull back out to return to their station.
No, to the other building, the building.
For this one here?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the fire department could turn in here, and then when they leave, they could just drive through the parking lot and go on 48th and go back on Teller and up on. Again, my guess is and we'll talk with the fire department about this, is if they're responding even to this address, my guess is they run up Teller Street to get there because there's just not going to be traffic on it.
Well, there'd have to be some way to prevent people from turning off and going through the parking lot of that building in order to get to.
Yeah, and so again, that's part of what we'll need to work with the building owner. We might add some speed bumps or do some different things, configure his parking lot where it doesn't seem like you can go through. There's some different things you can design-wise to sort of discourage that kind of movement. If there's there's not that many residents on 48th before you get to Teller Street, which does run all the way to 44th. And so there's just a handful of folks that would do this. And most of them, I think, if it was me, if this went away, I would just go down Watts, turn on 46, snake to the neighborhood, and then go home. We're not talking about a ton of traffic. We're going to get updated counts on this as we move forward on these side streets and actually do an analysis of what the impact of this change. Because it's a big enough change as part of the EA process, we'll have to look at, okay, where are we diverting traffic to? How much traffic are we impacting? And that kind of thing. So we're going to actually analyze this whole situation on where traffic is going to go and what they can do.
Okay, now, and also talking about the median.
Yep.
The medians, the drawings of the medians always show trees in the medians.
Right.
But you're going to reduce the size of the medians. Is there still going to be plantings in those?
So for most of on either side of 38th and 44th, because of the CFIs and the way things are happening, we've got just minimum width medians in most of those places. So with the addition of CFIs, we lost the ability to put a lot of trees up and down the medians. We still at this north end have some wider medians in locations, but it's just really from 46 up to about 47th. That's where we've got a fairly consistent long median that we can still keep and still put trees in because it'll still be 15 or 16 feet wide. Now, we do have where the crossover signals are, where we're going to put the peg crossings in because of those two-stage peg crossings and needing that wide median in the middle there at that location. On either side of that crossover signal, we would have the opportunity to put trees at those locations potentially, or some kind of plantings or public art or something. So we're still looking at all those things as an option. But yeah, those graphics I showed you from way back in the Pell days, that was the quickest thing I could grab this week or last week to throw in here to try to show some representation.
Thank you, Mr. Pond.
Comments really only. Just thank you for the hard work. Value engineering is a part of every project and obviously a painful part because you lose some program that you care about. And we are here for sure, some space, some different access for different modalities and having to still perhaps struggle with traffic movement and that's not solved, and nor should we try to even solve that tonight. I think that this is obviously a necessary step, and the process seems to be, a very thoughtful one in terms of how it played out. And with good ideas, I am prepared to support all of these with the caveat that all of the work that you've already stated in conversations and public outreach that still needs to be done, I assume that it will be in some of these nuanced details, will evolve and get right with the constituents, property owners, and the stakeholders. So, I'm sure there may be other questions. However, I am prepared to make a consensus that we move forward to that when the questions are done.
Any other comments? Let's see, how do we feel about consensus by Mr. Pond to move forward? Do we have consensus on that? Let's do it. Thank you.
Madam Mayor.
Mr. Mayor. I'm sorry, Mr. Urban. I thought you were. The prime center.
Sorry.
Is that a unanimous consent?
No, I was going to speak to that consensus before we took it, but I just, as it relates to the 48th and 47th access, I'd like to get more feedback from those adjacent property owners prior to committing to that particular proposal, because it does seem to be somewhat in flux. We don't have a real good idea what it's going to look like. That all the other items I think are well flushed out, but just given the impact to the neighborhood and whatnot, I want to make sure we have a better feel for those.
Mr. Pond?
Yeah, I concur with that. I guess that, and I should have stated it even more forcefully. I'm assuming that work has to happen, and if it doesn't work, in other words, we can't find, we can't get people aligned with this concept that that you're going to come back and tell us that it didn't work and we can't take that money.
And we'll actually do that with all of these proposals, because we got a lot of design and detail to get through on all these things. So.
Yeah. So does that generate a consensus among council? Okay, so have you got it recorded about where we are? Yep. Well, Mr. Westberg, thank you for a good presentation. A lot of work going on. Nice to get $5 million down. If that's the savings number, let's hope, and kind of go from there. Thank you. That'll conclude item number. Was that 2?
That was number
That
2.
was item number
Yes.
2. Let's move to item number 3, update on the Wheat Ridge Ward Station, where the G line begins.
The end of the
And
line.
we have
Base camp.
The
As we quote Mr. Urban.
well,
While Ken is setting up, I'll introduce a little bit. I think hopefully everything's there still, Ken. Yeah, we thought it was time to get a good update to you on the Wheat Ridge Ward Station project. And as you all know, this is one of our 2E projects. We do have some interest in development from on 3 different parcels, and including residential and a little bit of commercial. We have some updates on the regional park. And we also put together a marketing video, what we're going to show you tonight, which we're using to hopefully attract some of the outdoor rec industry that you all approved as a vision for this site. So I think we're going to start with a quick update, and then we'll show the video at the end. But
the one thing I don't have in my presentation is an update on RTD. You've been getting
yes.
updates, so at some point, whether you want to do that now or later.
Yeah, I can do that real quick now. And I think I did put there was a little bit of update in the memo. I haven't heard from actually RTD or DTP in the last couple days, but the last update I got about a week or so ago is they are running multiple trains now on the G line to do what I hope is the final testing. As you all remember, the Colorado PUC has given their blessing. They wanted to verify one last time the crossings. They've, I think, wrapped those up on the A line. They are able to transfer all that knowledge they learned on the A line to our G line. Plus, they were able to test the G line all day long. The A line they could only do at night. They're still, if everything moves forward, can't give a date yet. Still, they haven't given a date to me, but I'm still thinking, there could be August timeframe if everything moves forward. So, don't quote me, everybody, but that's just me. That's what based on what we've been hearing and the progress they've been making recently. So, good news there.
Yeah, so I'll be focused more on kind of some of our past planning efforts and some of the development activities that we're seeing. So we'll finish up with development updates, but maybe for the benefit a little bit of some of the newer council members, just wanted to kind of briefly highlight some of the things that we've done over the years to try and really facilitate redevelopment in this area, which with the $12 million in 2E funding becomes even more important, that we want to make sure that we're getting this area done right and being good stewards of our taxpayers' dollars who chose to invest fairly significantly to the tune of $12 million in improving the sales tax increase back in fall of 2016. So these are the topics that we'd like to cover, though I think we can cover them fairly quickly. So we started kind of our sub-area planning process for the area back in 2006 when RTD was really kicking off the preliminary environmental work. This is just one of the land use maps that was in that 2006 sub-area plan. We actually updated the sub-area plan in 2013 just based on some other things that had happened in the area. We'd finalized the design of the RTD station. We'd started to see some more development interest. We'd had a Dr. Cog study that I'll talk about briefly. So this wasn't really a terribly substantive update to the sub-area plan, but we did update it more recently in 2013. You can see that the We're trying to get a high degree of connectivity, and we're starting to actually see these types of streets get platted. So this is like a 51st connection, and the development of the Hance Ranch property is making that first connection. This is a street that RTD built as Taft Court as part of their project, and of course RTD has made certain improvements to their frontage on what's now called Ridge Road. We kind of have to remind everyone every time we talk about Ridge Road, this former 50th place is now officially called Ridge Road. So, and then you can see we're trying to get kind of north-south and east-west street connectivity throughout the area. The pink designation north of the tracks is all designated as kind of generically mixed-use development, and a couple of the properties are actually rezoned to one of our mixed-use TOD zone districts. And then on the two sides, we're really just kind of indicating a little bit of a transition so that you might see more auto-oriented uses that are on this edge adjacent to Ward Road traffic. And similarly, you want to make sure that you get a decent transition in terms of densities as it relates to these existing neighborhoods. And the Hance Ranch Townhome project, which was rezoned by City Council a couple years ago and is almost ready to start construction, was rezoned to MUN with the intent that it's a less intensive development pattern to be more appropriate adjacent to the single-family duplex neighborhood to the east. And then the red area in the south is really intended as more of a heavy commercial use. As council is aware, in the visioning plan that we've done with WSP in the last couple of years, we're looking at encouraging outdoor recreation industry uses, and that area really supports that. And there are a number of outdoor rec industry uses, probably a half dozen that are already operating in that area in existing buildings. So the implementation efforts to date, the Dr. Cog grant was something that really applied to the whole Gold Line corridor, and we worked cooperatively with Dr. Cog and all the other jurisdictions that are part of the team that's implementing just kind of good land use planning around this future transit investment that's hopefully soon to open. Part of that was to do a Ridge Road traffic study and a Ridge Road design study. We did that cooperatively with Arvada, and we're in the process as development takes place to actually implementing that road design in the real world. We do have urban renewal in place, and that's been in place since 2008? 11, okay. And we started the clock on that urban renewal TIF generation back in December of 2015 with all of our other urban renewal areas that we started the TIF clock. I mentioned we have rezoned two properties. The former Jolly Rancher site was rezoned a number of years to mixed use commercial TOD, so our most intensive TOD zoning. And then two properties were rezoned more recently, the former Hance Ranch Alpaca Farm, which was rezoned to mixed use commercial on the southern piece, and mixed use neighborhood on the northern piece, again to service that transition. We've also had a metropolitan district in place for the former Jolly Rancher site for a number of years, so that's another financial tool that could be used potentially to generate revenue to offset infrastructure costs through property tax mill levy. And then we have long had an RTD with IGA that identifies opportunities for potential joint development of in and around the station area.
IGA with RTD.
What did I say?
RTD with IGA.
Oh.
One of the acronyms.
Let the minutes so reflect. We did a ULI, Urban Land Institute, TAP, or Technical Advisory Panel, back in 2015. That's kind of an intensive effort, much like our value engineering process, where a group of commercial real estate experts come in and kind of brainstorm about what they think some of the best ideas are for the area. They were some of the people that started to say, maybe this isn't a traditional kind of residentially based TOD. Maybe it really does try and take advantage of the fact that there's already a lot of industrial employment out there and just build on that. So we're continuing to build on that idea. And then the transitions we've already spoken to. This is the WSP vision plan that we developed during the course of 2016. We really did that at Council's and Patrick's initiation to try and refine the vision to be more implementable and really to be able to communicate to the development community what the city wants for the area and put just a little more meat on the bones over and above what we had in our sub-area plan, which was fairly general in nature. This again identified potentially regional park opportunities in and around the southern two ponds adjacent to I-70. It encouraged the potential for co-working space throughout the area to tap into that outdoor rec industry market. Identified a potential for a pedestrian bridge in this location to connect the north side and the south sides of the tracks. It identified the notion of a linear park that would connect potential future regional park amenities up into the heart of the station area. So this is a document that we didn't adopt officially as a survey plan, but it serves as a vision plan that we certainly communicate to the development community. One of the reasons we developed that plan was that we were going to be presenting at a conference at the ULI TOD Marketplace. That took place in the fall of 2016, and just any opportunity that we kind of have to pitch the development opportunities in this area, we try and take advantage of. You all know that the voters approved in the fall of 2016 the $12 million for this TOD through the temporary half-penny sales tax increase. Our goal is to certainly spend that $12 million in a manner that leverages private sector investment, and that's in fact what the language of the ballot question asked us to do. This is a list of potential projects. So 52nd Avenue, Tabor Street, Ridge Road in 2 locations, 51st, Ward Road improvements. Oops. So these are all potential projects. The linear park is depicted. The yellow depicts the potential pedestrian bridge. And then, of course, the regional park are all opportunities. They all come with significant costs. The local street costs have been up to $8 million. The pedestrian bridge over the railroad tracks was up to between $1.5 and $4 million. We do have some conceptual designs of that. The linear park has been costed at up to $5 million. The regional park up to $5 million. And Ward Road improvements, just minimal improvements, could be up to $2 million. Obviously, that adds up to more than $12 million. Our slogan has been, how can we turn $12 million into $50 million? Whether that's taking advantage of urban renewal TIF dollars, private sector investments, state and federal grants, will generate significant parkland fees in lieu. So we're trying to cobble together whatever funding sources we can to be able to fund what's needed, which is a lot more than just $12 million. We have an MOU that Patrick executed with Jefferson County and Arvada that identifies opportunities for us to jointly identify street connections. The 52nd Avenue street connection has its challenges in terms of design and implementation, but it's a really important connectivity, just to the extent that the only signalized intersection that we have out under Ward Road and likely will ever have is 52nd Avenue. Connecting Ridge is challenging from a traffic engineering standpoint because of the proximity to the rail crossing. And we're anticipating negotiating a 52nd Avenue IGA with those same parties, Jefferson County and Arvada, that would identify cost sharings. Just some images of the bridge concepts. We did a small contract with WSP to do conceptual bridge design planning. So you can see a few of the different designs that we took a look at. This is some graphics that depict what might happen. This is from the WSP document in terms of a linear park. You can see it's kind of an urban form, but identifies both activity and bike connectivity, but potentially combined with some softer design aspects. These were some of the graphics from the WSP document, the vision document, as to what might occur in and around those ponds in terms of regional park amenities. And now on to maybe some development updates. This is some renderings of the concepts that are proposed for the Hance Ranch townhomes that are being proposed to be developed by Remington Homes. That's on the northern of the half of the...
It's like 60, what's the number?
72?
72-ish?
Yeah. This is something that we're working on with Pat Henry's development group. This would be higher density structured parking on the southern portion there. So this would intended to be one of those, highly amenitized, higher density, 4 to 5 story multifamily wrapped around structured parking. This has a funding gap and we're working diligently with our financial consulting group, Economic and Planning Systems, side by side with the developer, who has a great financial team on board as well, to figure out how the city can use leverage through tax increment financing and potentially a portion of the 2E funds to start filling that gap to get a really appropriate higher density product right at the station. And finally, this is more preliminary in nature, but we've been meeting with a national home builder, Toll Brothers, on concept plans for development of the former Jolly Rancher site. They have not purchased it, but they have it under contract to purchase and are proposing a townhouse product that could also include some commercial space. So they're proposing generally blocks of townhomes, building out a street network. So this is kind of a surrogate for 51st. 51st would line more like this, but this is a surrogate for that, but that would be a local street. This would be a local street, that would be a local street, and this would potentially be 51st extended out to Ward Road. So the street connectivity is important to us, and these would be designed with on-street parking, with sidewalks, so they'd really feel much like the streets that have been built further to the east, such as Taft Court, and the sections of the street that have been built by RTD. So on-street parking, opportunities for biking, good detached sidewalks, tree lawns, so very urban, transit-friendly types of streets. The townhouse project is maybe a lower density than we had thought of on this property, which is, I guess, a disadvantage of this site plan. And this site plan is very conceptual in nature. They haven't moved forward with any official application at this point. The advantage of it, though, is it gives you this type of a street grid, right, as opposed to a larger multifamily projects, which often take up bigger footprints and maybe don't have kind of the high level of walkability that a townhouse project does. Another advantage of townhouses, at least in my opinion, is that it gives you a real strong building orientation to the street. So you have a real nice, pleasant streetscape environment with these being, front stoop types of townhouses that are oriented towards this 51st Street. They're proposing in these oranger units that these would be, live-work units. So also kind of townhome in design, but they'd have more of a storefront look at the ground level, and they're zoned to be potentially live-work. So you could be looking at doing, having small businesses here, whether it be a hair salon or a yoga studio or a law office or an accountant office, or things that can benefit the neighborhood. One thing that we're very cognizant of, I know, is that we want this to be a neighborhood with good amenities, right? And good amenities include things like coffee shops and personal services, so that you take advantage of the fact that you have access to transit, but you can also, on the weekends, have access to walk to certain daily conveniences. We are proposing to include a commercial space or potentially a two-story mixed-use building at this corner. This is the portion of the site that's closest to the station, and we think that's an opportunity to really preserve some commercial activity. So again, you might be able to get a small restaurant or a coffee shop or some retail in there that really provides a benefit to the neighborhood and the several hundred units that are either under construction or soon will be under construction in the area. So those are really the development updates. South of the tracks, we are seeing the FICO building got finished, and there actually are some good tenants going in there. We've got a distillery going in there. There's a couple outdoor rec types of businesses that are going into that building as well. So I think some interesting commercial activity in the area. I know Steve Art has been reached out to by one of the mixed-use kind of office industrial buildings, and they're looking for a partnership and love the idea of outdoor rec. We got the downriver rafting recently occupied the building just north of the frontage road that was built last year. So some really exciting tenants that are kind of adding to that outdoor rec theme that we're trying to have. Next steps, I mentioned, or didn't mention really, but where do we stand on the scope of work for that? Okay. So we're working with our design consultant, AECOM, and our two regional partners, Jefferson County and Arvada to really cobble together a series of a half dozen different traffic studies that have been completed for the area into one master traffic study that really identifies future streets that are needed, future intersection improvements that are needed, and really joint cost sharing. You know, whether it be for 52nd Avenue and punching that street through, but there are also going to be improvements needed to Ridge Road. There are other opportunities south of the railroad tracks to provide connectivity east to west at 49th and or 50th. And they all cross jurisdictional lines, right? So that connection would benefit a property that's currently located within the city limits of Arvada. So trying to take a real regional approach both to getting the connectivity done, but also appropriately paying or portioning the costs. You know, a lot of the development that's occurring that needs to get out to 52nd Avenue and Ward Road is actually traffic that's generated in Arvada, and they acknowledge that they need to be part of that solution, both in terms of getting the design completed, but also paying for construction. So we're not there yet, but we're working very collaboratively, I think, on an IGA that would portion those costs appropriately, and we'll be sharing costs on the regional traffic study as well, or at least agreed conceptually that we would be sharing those costs. Ridge Road and 52nd Avenue are both going to be high priorities for getting under design and then construction. I think we kind of collectively think that those are probably some of the projects that we want to fund with 2E funds. They make a lot of sense, they're needed, and they're fairly straightforward ways to spend some of that early dollars. So we're working, what's the update, Mark, on, we're working.
We hope to get the council in August with a contract to approve a design consultant to design whatever we need it there, probably those two roads for us.
They're out to bid.
They're out, yeah, they're out. We're waiting on proposals.
Okay. The regional park planning, we had, again, AECon had helped us start that regional park planning process several months ago, and further fleshing out kind of the plans that WSP had done conceptually in the vision plan. We kind of put that on hold because we still don't have the property owners on board to be our partners in that, and we want to make sure that we're not getting ahead of ourselves. We actually had a productive meeting with the owners of the western of the two ponds about 2 weeks ago. That owner has intentions to develop the property, probably for a mix of commercial uses, but also doing what's called a fixed system wakeboard park. So wakeboard parks that don't get pulled by boats, but wakeboard parks that get pulled by cables. They're really popular, and they have done these, they've operated these before, and that's their intention. They also have some kind of outdoor rec theme retailers that they might, that they have a relationship with that might be part of the project. There might be opportunities to have some public access to do more, at least a limited amount of more passive water activities as well. And they think really there's some actual development potential for the properties on the north side at the intersection adjacent to the frontage road to, if you can appropriately engineer it and get fill in and make those more developable parcels, that they could have some regional or some commercial potential. The property owner on the east, Bob Vermillion, has long had a vision for that plan and has zoning in place to develop it for a mix of commercial uses, including a hotel. We're not sure, and we are in active communications with him and have been, and we actually jointly market the property out to the commercial community. We've developed some marketing brochures. He's a little, we're getting mixed signals on his ability to partner with the city, but we're getting a scope of work from a commercial real estate expert who specializes in hotel market studies, and that's, we're going to get a market study done to see if it's a good site for a hotel in the opinion of the hotel industry. We've got some competing sites for hotels to the extent that Clear Creek Crossing property anticipates having potentially a couple hotels, and there's actually a project that's moving forward at Kipling between 44th and the highway that could have a hotel as well. So at some point you want to see how much market saturation there is and whether this is the best site for hotel, and if it's not, what might it be a good site for? You know, could it be a good corporate office site or something else that would maybe be in that outdoor rec industry theme? So continuing to work with both those property owners, but since they have not really said, yes, we want to sell it to you for a regional park right now, we put that regional park planning process on hold to not spend that money without a good end purpose. I mentioned we're in detailed multiple rounds of discussions with the Trax multifamily developer about a public-private partnership that would include TIF and potential 2E funds that would help offset the gap that you have in trying to get a really expensive market rate project done that includes structured parking. And of course they have plenty of other offsite improvements, including the construction of 51st and improvements to Tabor Street and the structure itself. The Ridge Road access permit is kind of a detail, but we found out recently from CDOT that because we connected the road from which was when 50th was previously a dead end, and that in connecting the road and making that a through street, that actually triggers the need for us to update what's called our access permit. So we're developing a scope of work and a fee to have AECom, who have really been helpful in being an extensive staff on this project, do a scope of work to apply for that Ridge Road access permit. Shouldn't be super expensive, but it's fairly time consuming. And Ward Road improvements are also probably in the mix when we send out the referral on the Jolly Rancher site with potentially a concept plan application. We're anticipating that they will be asked to make improvements to Ridge Road, probably Ward Road, to probably an XLD cell lane, the length of their frontage, and of course we want to get a good sidewalk system in place to start getting better pedestrian connectivity on Ward. So that's in the mix as well. And lastly, just the timing of the Jolly Rancher concept plan. They have, under the mixed-use commercial TUD, because they're over 10 acres and because they're proposing to be phased development, they have to do a concept plan. That's an administrative process. And then their site plan approvals will be administrative as well, and all reviewed subject to the mixed-use zoning design standards. And with that, before we get into questions, I think we've got a video.
Yep, it's up there. I'll expand it too.
Known as a transit-oriented development, Wheat Ridge Base Camp has evolved into a transit outdoor development, attracting manufacturers and businesses focused on outdoor recreation. Colorado has a booming outdoor recreation economy. With its $28 billion in consumer spending, 229,000 in Colorado jobs, $2 billion in state and local revenue, and $9.7 billion in wages and salaries. Wheat Ridge Base Camp is already home to many outdoor recreation companies offering improved networking and marketing. Redevelopment is already underway near the station, with multifamily housing, office, and commercial development. Co-working and maker spaces offer creative new opportunities to define workplaces geared toward recreation. In close proximity to transit, major roadways, and the interstate highway, the location offers unique connectivity for a workforce living in the greater metro Denver area, as well as easy travel into and out of Denver International Airport. Planning is also underway for features particularly attractive to employees of outdoor recreation-focused companies, including a series of linear parks, bike paths, and a defining regional park nearby. With $12 million of locally funded sales tax bond proceeds dedicated to the area adjacent to the Wheat Ridge Ward Station commuter rail line, Basecamp already has the infrastructure to create a successful recreation-focused outdoor development. Add to that the urban renewal tax increment financing, an enhanced sales tax incentive program, a business development zone program, and a corporate personal property tax rebate. And developers have all the tools necessary to build a successful business in this unique setting. Join us at Wheat Ridge Base Camp, where adventure begins at the end of the line.
Okay. Thank you, Ken, for that. We'll open it up for questions or comments from council. Mr. Matthews.
Just one question. That regional park, if that manages to go to fruition, do we know yet if we're envisioning that would be more of a Clear Creek Trail, natural, woodsy environment rather than like a manicured playground / park?
We really looked at the gamut. I mean, I think if for some reason we were to be able to acquire the eastern property, I think that might lend itself to, you know, a more formalized pond with more formalized traditional park spaces. I think if you're looking at the western pond, it probably, you know, I think the concepts that we were looking at were more naturalized, taking advantage of the water, but also concepts for doing, you know, maybe mountain bike trails or on the northern portion that would go take advantage of the slope and the vegetation. So we've really looked at the gamut.
I was just thinking that would, at least that western pond, if it's that naturalized, what you're talking about, naturalized, I'll call it, would fit in with the base camp theme very well. Yeah. And then I agree if you needed something a little more manicured on the other east part, you know, it would be great.
Additional comments? Mr. Urban.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With respect to the regional park and the 2 lakes that are there, what's the water source for those lakes, or would there be water rights associated with that, or how does that?
We don't fully know that. We believe them to be...
They're both spring-fed.
Yeah, spring-fed primarily, some runoff. And we've heard from multiple sources that the water quality is very good. In fact, we were out on site on Friday afternoon meeting with this hotel expert, and he anecdotally, he lives in the area, had heard that one of the 2 ponds gets used for scuba training because it has really good water quality. I was there with Steve Art, who is a scuba instructor, but he was not aware of that. But this gentleman, Steve also was his name, but he felt pretty confident that he'd heard that. But the water quality, from everything we've heard, is good.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, additional comments? I had one question. We've had some discussion at Dr. Cog about a grade separation at the railroad tracks at the Coors, for the Coors beer train.
Yeah, and we've talked about that. It's even been kind of on our list of potential projects. It's not on our list of potential projects right now for a couple of reasons. It's really expensive, and gentlemen behind me jump in here, but you know, we back of the napkin, we estimated that it could be a $30 million project. Mm-hmm. You know, we wouldn't want to put a lot of money into that, I don't think, because it really doesn't provide all that much benefit to the city of Wheat Ridge. It's more of a benefit to Arvada and to a lesser extent Jefferson County. Right. I mean, it's a great regional transportation facility, no doubt, but I think it also wasn't. I see someone standing, so I'll stop.
Mark, did you want to address that?
Yeah, so I was at a Jeffco sub-regional forum meeting this afternoon, just the technical advisory group on that. And I had mentioned that was on the list still of things to maybe consider for a regional project. I said, we probably need to take that off. And the guy from Arvada said, wait, let's put it back on. We're really interested in doing something there. So I'm getting mixed signals from Arvada. I've talked to one staff person who said, no, we're all focused on Indiana Street, so we're not going to do this. But this was the guy above her. So Arvada seems really interested in trying to pursue something there. And I think Jeffco might be a little bit. So we'll see how that whole thing progresses. It is expensive. There's a lot of sources for potential funding. The railroads have funding that they do for that sort of thing to grade separate things, and Certainly if we can get some regional money or something like that. I think, our focus, of course, is going to be more on Wadsworth to make sure we get that funded. But if Arvada really wants to push this thing and do something there, they've got a lot of people moving in north of there that are going to be wanting to get down to I-70. So
Right. And
they may be feeling the pressure.
and the time horizon may be a little bit further out than the other things that we're talking about at the base camp.
And I think the first step is we need to get it on the Dr. Cog maps.
Right, yeah.
So that should happen, or needs to happen.
Okay. Additional discussion?
The marketing video might have a few more tweaks to it, but we're using that to reach out to the outdoor rec industry, and as you all know, the outdoor rec shows are now in Colorado. They moved from Utah, and we had our first one a few months ago. The next one's in July, so we're going to be sharing that video with many of those companies that come and see if hopefully they are looking for a spot in Wheat Ridge.
Terrific. All right. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate the presentation. That was good. That concludes item number 3. We're going to go to staff reports. Mr. Goff?
The only real quick thing I have is I passed out some hard copies of the NRS steering committee application and a little bit of background. It's been out since Friday. It's been on the website, and we're putting it on all of our social media sites. We're already getting numerous calls and applications already submitted, so there's quite a bit of interest. So I gave everybody about 10 hard copies, so you can pass these out when you see folks, but otherwise direct them to the city's website. They're on there, and they can fill them out online. They're going to be, so we're trying to shoot for, I think, July, is it on there? June 15th is the deadline to have these submitted, yep.
So that's coming right up. So let's get the publicity out on that. Thank you very much. Elected officials reports. Ms. Dozman.
Sorry, just real quick. So the 49th annual Wheat Ridge Carnation Festival is about 2 months away. So I just wanted to let the community know that the parade registration form is up on the website, as well as our plate design contest, which is our 2nd annual. So we are soliciting local artists to submit entries for the parade plate design for this year's awards. The deadline is June 15th to enter for the plate design contest. And we are also seeking nominations for this year's parade royalty, or festival royalty rather. So we nominate and elect a grand marshal, a count, and a countess.
Thank you.
Thank you. The theme for the parade is Deep Roots.
Good. Any additional comments from council? All right.
Criterion is this.
The Criterion Brewfest is this Sunday?
Is it, Sunday?
Sunday at, on 38th Avenue. I want to thank Lutheran Hospital for hosting Heroes of Hope awards last races, and last Saturday I was there to start the youngest group of racers. Had a great morning, great day to be outside, a lot of activity, great community building. So a lot of things going on this summer. Just sort of stay tuned and stay aware. So if there's nothing else, we will adjourn our meeting. Thank you all very much.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, ma'am.
Mayor.
I'm sorry.
I just wanted to, this is mostly for the public, is that primary ballots are going to be coming in the mail, and I've already seen it on the news, but we can't emphasize enough. If you will only get a ballot if you are registered to vote. Republicans will get a Republican ballot. Democrats will get a Democrat ballot. If you are registered as an independent, you will get both ballots. You can only vote one of them. So pick which side you want to align with for the purposes of the primary, and destroy the other one. If you vote on both of them and send both in, neither one will count. So you can only pick one, and I'm going to say this every week until June 26th.
Okay, and those
That's all. Thank you.
We should be receiving those pretty soon, shouldn't we?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Somebody dropped one off today, I saw.
Oh, okay. I have not seen it.
Yeah. There's a box out front.
All right. So with that, it's an election year. We will adjourn this meeting. Thank you.